He had everything a man could want, and nothing a man could need. 12 years. Not one real laugh. Not one moment where Ethan Carter let the walls come down. He built his empire the same way he built his grief, brick by brick, floor by floor, until the thing was so tall that light couldn't reach the bottom anymore. Then a woman with a worn bag and tired eyes walked through his door and ruined everything he thought he needed. This is the story of a billionaire who forgot how to feel, a little girl who learned to be silent, and the woman who broke them both open. If this story touches something in you, hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning always started the same way in the Carter penthouse. 6:04 a.m. Not 6 o'clock, not 6:15. 6:04, because that was when the automated blinds retracted on the east-facing floor-to-ceiling windows, and the Manhattan skyline did what it always did. It performed. Orange light came sideways across the Hudson, climbed the glass towers, and eventually hit the 43rd floor where Ethan Carter was already dressed, already standing at his desk, already 3 emails deep into a morning that would consume 10 more hours of his life before he thought to eat. He was 32 years old. He looked older, not in the way that made people say he's weathered or distinguished, just in the way that made them uncomfortable at cocktail parties, when they realized his eyes weren't tracking the conversation, that he was somewhere else, that he was always somewhere else. The apartment itself was stunning in the way that museum exhibits are stunning. Impressive, impeccably arranged, and completely untouchable. White marble floors that reflected the ceiling lights in long, pale strips. A kitchen built for a chef that rarely produced anything warmer than a protein shake. Artwork on the walls that an interior designer had selected based on Ethan's answer to a single question. What do you want people to feel when they enter this space? He'd said, respect. Not warmth, not comfort. Respect. The designer had delivered exactly that. The only room in the apartment that was different, the only room where the marble gave way to something softer, where there were actual colors on the walls instead of calculated neutrals, was Lily's room. And even there, it had been arranged more for the impression of childhood than for the actual chaos of it. The stuffed animals were lined up. The books were alphabetized on a built-in shelf. The small pink desk in the corner held sharpened pencils in a row. Lily herself sat at that desk most mornings, already at her workbooks before her private tutor arrived at 8. She was 7 years old. She didn't make a mess. That was the thing that nobody talked about. Nobody on the staff, anyway. A 7-year-old who didn't make messes, who didn't run down the hallway, who said please and thank you and ate with both feet flat on the floor and her napkin in her lap. Who, when asked how she was doing, said, "Fine, thank you," in a voice that was perfectly pitched and completely hollow. The housekeeper, Mrs. Dalton, had worked in this apartment for 4 years. She was a practical woman from Connecticut, the type who kept her opinions to herself and her schedule laminated. But sometimes, when she was straightening Lily's room and found the child's drawings tucked under the mattress, drawings of people laughing, drawings of parks and dogs and birthday cakes with messy frosting, she'd stand there for a moment longer than her job required. Then she'd tuck them back, exactly as she'd found them. The nanny situation had become, in Mrs. Dalton's private assessment, a situation. In the past 8 months, they'd gone through 4 of them. The first, a highly credentialed woman named Patricia, lasted 6 weeks before citing an incompatibility of household philosophy, which, translated from professional into plain English, meant she couldn't handle the silence. The second was a younger woman, cheerful and well-meaning, who'd made the mistake of bringing a board game into the living room on a rainy Tuesday and suggesting Lily and Mr. Carter play together. She was gone by Thursday. The third nanny had the emotional constitution of a field medic and lasted 3 months, until Lily accidentally spilled orange juice on the marble and the woman had held the child while she cried about it, and somehow that act of compassion had been the thing that made Ethan Carter call the agency and say, in a tone that suggested no room for discussion, "I need someone different." The fourth didn't make it past the first week. Now it was a Thursday morning in late October, and Mrs. Dalton was on the phone with the Hartwell Domestic Staffing Agency for the 3rd time that month. She stood in the kitchen, far from Ethan's study, and kept her voice low. I understand you're doing everything you can, she said, stirring a cup of tea she hadn't touched yet. But I need someone who can start soon. The household is, she searched for the right word, strained. We have one candidate, the woman on the other end said in the careful tone of someone managing expectations. She doesn't have the usual profile we place for a client like Mr. Carter. No elite education. Her references are from a daycare center in Brooklyn and a family in Queens. But she passed all our background checks. She's experienced with children, and she's available immediately. Mrs. Dalton rubbed her temple. Send her tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. She hung up and stood for a moment in the kitchen, listening to the apartment. From down the hall came the faint sound of Lily's pencil moving across paper. From Ethan's study, nothing. Just the ambient hum of the city 43 floors below, and the particular pressurized quiet of a home that had forgotten how to exhale. Please, Mrs. Dalton thought, let this one last. Teach. The next morning, Maya Brooks arrived 17 minutes early. She'd taken 2 subway trains and a bus to get to the Upper East Side, which had required leaving her apartment in Bushwick at 7:15 a.m. She was carrying a canvas bag that had a broken strap, held together now with a safety pin. And she was wearing her good coat, which was a dark navy wool thing she'd bought 4 years ago and maintained with a level of care that spoke to someone who could not afford mistakes with clothing. Her shoes were clean, her hair was pulled back. She stood on the sidewalk outside the Carter building and looked up. 43 floors of glass and steel, a doorman in a gray uniform, a lobby she could see through the revolving doors that was larger than her entire apartment. The kind of building where the air inside smells different, where there's a softness to the light that costs money to produce. Maya took a breath. She'd been in nice buildings before. She'd worked for families in Tribeca and once, briefly, in a townhouse on the Upper West Side. She didn't get intimidated by wealth exactly. She got tired of it sometimes. The particular kind of exhaustion that came from moving through rooms you weren't supposed to belong in, smiling at the right moments, making yourself smaller so that the money in the room could expand. But her grandmother's surgery was in 6 weeks. $43,000. She had $900 in her checking account. Maya picked up her bag, walked through the revolving door, and gave the doorman her name. Trot. The lobby attendant called up. There was a wait of about 4 minutes, she counted, and then she was directed to an elevator that required a key card to access, which the attendant provided temporarily. The elevator was quiet and fast, and deposited her into a small private vestibule outside the penthouse door. Mrs. Dalton opened it before Maya could knock. The woman was in her 50s, solid and gray-haired, and she had the look of someone who had absorbed a significant amount of professional stress and developed a kind of structural immunity to it. She looked Maya over, not unkindly, but completely, the way someone who manages a household looks at a potential problem and tries to assess it quickly. "You're early," Mrs. Dalton said. "I wanted time to find the building," Maya said. "I've never been to this part of the Upper East Side." That was honest enough that Mrs. Dalton stepped back and opened the door wider. Inside, Maya didn't let herself react to the apartment, not visibly. She kept her face neutral while she took it in, the scale of it, the height of the ceilings, the way every object in every room looked like it had been placed by someone whose job was placing objects. Beautiful, immaculate, and underneath all of that, quiet, in a way that felt structural, like the silence had been built in. "Mr. Carter is in his study," Mrs. Dalton said, leading her down a hallway. "He'll interview you himself, I should tell you." She paused. "He's direct. He doesn't do small talk. Don't take it personally." "Okay," Maya said. "Lily is with her tutor right now. You'll meet her after." "How old is she?" 7. She's... Mrs. Dalton chose her words the same way she arranged the apartment, with precision. "She's a very well-behaved child." Something in the way she said it made Maya look at her. Mrs. Dalton was already moving toward the study door. Ethan Carter was standing when Maya entered, not sitting behind his desk the way she'd half expected. Standing at the window, looking out at the city, his phone face down on the desk beside him. He was taller than she'd anticipated, in a dark gray dress shirt with the sleeves pushed to his elbows. and he turned when she came in with the unhurried efficiency of someone who made assessments quickly and didn't feel the need to perform the process. He looked at her bag, at her coat, at her face. She looked back at him. There was something about his face that surprised her, not his attractiveness, which she registered and filed away with the same practicality she brought to everything, but the flatness of it. Like someone had taken a face designed to be expressive and very deliberately removed all the settings above neutral. He was 32. The agency had told her his age. But his eyes were the eyes of someone who'd decided, at some earlier point, that feeling things was inefficient. "Sit down," he said. Not "please sit down," just the instruction. Maya sat down. He remained standing. She'd seen this tactic before, in other interviews, other households. Some employers used physical height as a management tool. She didn't find it intimidating. She found it mildly interesting. "You worked at Sunshine Daycare in Brooklyn," he said, picking up a single sheet of paper from his desk. Her application, she assumed. "And before that, a private family in Queens, the Nguyens." "That's right. The Nguyen children were 4 and 6. You worked there for a year." "A year and 3 months." He glanced up. Not surprised exactly. More like recalibrating. "Why did you leave?" "They moved to Vancouver. Mrs. Nguyen's mother was ill. Before that, the daycare." "You were there 2 years." "Almost 3. Why did you leave?" "The center lost its lease. The building was redeveloped." He set the paper down, looked at her again. "Neither of those departures was your choice." "No." "What's your weakness with children?" That caught her off guard enough that she paused. Not long, but she felt the pause. "My weakness," she repeated. "Every applicant tells me their strengths. I've heard about patience and creativity and developmental philosophy and God knows what else. I want to know what you're bad at." Maya thought about it honestly. "I let them take risks sometimes when I should probably be more cautious. I'll let a kid climb a tree that's maybe a little too tall or get muddy in a park when we're supposed to be somewhere after. I make those judgment calls and sometimes they're wrong." He studied her. "Has anyone been hurt?" "A sprained wrist once, 3 years ago. A little boy at the daycare climbed a rope ladder and fell. He was fine within 2 weeks, but I've thought about it a lot since." "What do you think about it?" "I think I should have been standing closer, and I think that—" She stopped. "What?" "I think that was the day I understood the difference between letting a child experience the world and actually being present while they do it. Both things matter. You can't do one without the other." The room was quiet. Outside, 43 floors below, Manhattan was going about its morning. Ethan Carter looked at the window for a moment, then back at her. "My daughter's name is Lily," he said. "She's 7. Her mother died the day she was born. I don't talk about that with her in any depth. She knows the facts, not the weight of them. I'd ask you not to introduce that weight if it comes up." "Understood. She has a routine. I'll have Mrs. Dalton walk you through it. I expect it to be followed." "I understand routines." "I'm not sure you do," he said, and there was no edge in it, which somehow made it more pointed. The other nannies understood routines conceptually. What they didn't understand was that in this household, the routine is not a suggestion and it's not a starting point for improvisation. It exists because it functions, because Lily functions within it. When it's disrupted, she becomes— He stopped himself, recalibrated again. "When it's disrupted, the household has a difficult time." Maya kept her voice even. "Can I ask you something?" He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. "What does Lily do when she's happy?" A long pause. Something moved across his face. Too fast to read, but it was there. "She plays piano," he said finally. "She's been taking lessons for 2 years." "What else?" "I'm sorry?" "What else does she do when she's happy?" Another pause, longer this time. "I don't know," Ethan Carter said. He said it like he was reading a number off a spreadsheet, like it was a data point he'd noted and not yet addressed. And Maya looked at him, this tall, controlled man in his glass tower, and understood something about this household that the agency file hadn't been able to tell her. It wasn't just that he'd locked himself inside silence after losing his wife. It was that in doing so, he'd never noticed that his daughter had locked herself in there with him. She met Lily 20 minutes later. Mrs. Dalton brought her to the sitting room where Lily was waiting with the careful posture of a child who had been coached in the careful posture of adults. She was small for 7, with her father's dark eyes and, Maya suspected, her mother's something in the shape of her face that she couldn't quite name. Her hair was in 2 neat braids. She was wearing a dress that was perfectly clean. She looked at Maya the way that children who are accustomed to being assessed look at new adults, measuring whether this was someone who would require performance or whether, possibly, there was an exit available. "Hi," Maya said. She didn't bend down. She'd learned long ago that bending to a child's level when they haven't invited that closeness yet felt like an intrusion. She just stood and looked at Lily like she was a person. "Hello," Lily said, perfectly pitched, completely hollow. "I'm Maya." "I know, Mrs. Dalton told me." "Did she tell you anything else?" Lily considered this with the gravity of a diplomat. "She said you were from Brooklyn." "I am." "I've never been to Brooklyn." "You haven't missed any disasters," Maya said, "but there's good pizza." Something happened at the corner of Lily's mouth. Not quite a smile. More like the ghost of the intention of one. There and gone. They regarded each other. "Do you like piano?" Maya asked. "Yes," Lily said. "What's your favorite thing to play?" A pause. Lily glanced toward the hallway, unconsciously, Maya thought, in the direction of her father's study. Then back. "I play what my teacher assigns me." "That's not what I asked." Lily blinked. Apparently people in this household didn't rephrase questions. "I like..." She stopped. Started again, quieter. "There's a song I heard once on the radio. I don't know what it's called. Mrs. Dalton had it on in the kitchen. It went..." And then, barely audible, Lily hummed a few bars of something. Something loose and swinging, not classical at all, a little jazz-adjacent and wildly inappropriate for the classical curriculum Maya guessed she was being trained in. Then Lily seemed to hear herself. She stopped, straightened. "I play what my teacher assigns," she said again. Maya looked at the 7-year-old girl who had just hummed jazz in a penthouse where jazz had no business being, and then quickly erased the evidence and felt something that wasn't quite sadness and wasn't quite anger but was somewhere in the neighborhood of both. "That's cool," Maya said, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We can figure out what it's called later, if you want." Lily said nothing, but she didn't look away. The first week was an exercise in negotiation that neither party acknowledged was happening. Maya followed the routine. Of course she did. She understood what it cost her, financially, to be here. And she understood that blowing up a household in week 1 was not a sustainable survival strategy. But she followed it the way a musician follows a piece of sheet music while listening to something different underneath it. She arrived at 8 a.m., took over from the tutor at noon, handled Lily's afternoon schedule, language workbook, piano practice, reading hour, and was done by 6. She ate her packed lunch in the kitchen. She took Lily to the park on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, which was on the schedule, and she walked the route that was on the schedule, which had been written down and laminated. She walked the route, but she let Lily look, that was all. Just looking. There was a bodega on 82nd Street with a cat that lived in the front window. On their second Thursday walk, Lily stopped walking when she saw it. Just stopped, mid-stride, her eyes fixed on the cat. An orange tabby asleep on a stack of paper bags with its paw over its nose. "We have to keep moving," Lily said it to herself as much as to Maya. "We have 7 minutes of buffer in the schedule, Maya said. She'd checked. Lily looked up at her. "Technically," Maya said, "we're still on schedule." They stood there for 4 minutes watching the cat sleep. On the way back, Lily said, without looking at Maya, "His name is probably something orange." "Probably," Maya agreed. That was all. But that night, Mrs. Dalton, who noticed everything in this apartment and said nothing about most of it, found Lily at the kitchen table after dinner, drawing a small orange cat on the corner of her math worksheet. The housekeeper said nothing. She went to make tea. The first real rupture came at the end of week 2. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't involve a scene or raised voices. Those things didn't happen in the Carter penthouse. It was smaller than that, which somehow made it larger. Maya had been making lunch. She'd noticed in her first week that the kitchen contained ingredients for approximately 40 meals, and that the meal prepared for Lily every day was a rotation of 5 things: pasta with butter, grilled chicken, rice with vegetables, a specific brand of yogurt with granola, or a turkey sandwich with the crust cut off. All nutritionally sound, all completely predictable. She'd asked Mrs. Dalton on day 3 whether there was any flexibility in the lunch menu. Mrs. Dalton had given her the look of someone who has learned which questions to answer directly and which to route around obstacles. Mr. Carter likes consistency for Lily. So Maya had followed the lunch rotation. But on the second Friday, she found herself with a surplus of apples in the kitchen. Apparently, they'd been ordered in bulk from some organic delivery service, and she did something small and not premeditated. She made apple bread. It was just a quick loaf, the kind she made on weekends in her apartment in Bushwick, the recipe she'd gotten from her grandmother, who'd gotten it from her mother, and who knows where before that. Brown sugar, cinnamon, 2 apples, a cup of flour. Nothing special. It took 40 minutes. The apartment filled with the smell of it. She hadn't considered that. She was so accustomed to the smell in her own kitchen that she hadn't thought about what it would do to a space that smelled of nothing, of stone and recycled air and whatever the cleaning products were. The smell of baking bread moved through the apartment like something with weight. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway 13 minutes after the oven went on. She stood there in her pressed school clothes, holding her afternoon reading book, and looked at the oven. "What is that?" she asked. "Apple bread." "Is that on the menu?" "No." Lily's brow furrowed with the moral complexity of someone confronting a legitimately difficult ethical dilemma. "Did you clear it with my dad?" "No," Maya said, "but there are a lot of apples, and the recipe only takes 40 minutes, and I thought—" She shrugged. "Sometimes you just make the thing." Lily stood in the doorway a moment longer. Then she came and sat at the kitchen counter and opened her reading book and read with the smell of baking filling the room around her. She didn't say anything about it. When the bread came out and Maya cut 2 slices and put one in front of her, Lily looked at it for a moment. Then she ate it. It was nothing. It was a 7-year-old eating a piece of bread. But the way Lily ate it, slowly, carefully, like she was paying attention to every bite, like this particular arrangement of flour and apples and brown sugar had given her something she couldn't quite name yet, Maya watched that and felt the back of her throat tighten in a way she had not anticipated. She busied herself washing the mixing bowl. She didn't see Ethan Carter standing in the hallway. He'd come out of his study for a glass of water, a thing he did maybe twice in an afternoon, moving quickly, not looking sideways. And he'd stopped outside the kitchen doorway, and he was standing there watching his daughter eat a piece of bread with the focused, careful attention of a scientist, observing a rare event in a controlled environment. He was watching his daughter look happy, not performing happiness, not executing contentment at the appropriate moment, just happy, absorbed in a piece of bread in a warm kitchen. He stood there until Lily said something to Maya, and Maya responded, and the two of them had a small, ordinary conversation about whether apples or pears made a better bread. Lily said apples, Maya argued for pears. Lily said Maya was wrong with the certainty of a scientist who had now tasted one data point. Ethan went back to his study. He didn't get the water. He sat down at his desk and stared at his second monitor for 11 minutes before he picked up his phone and answered the email he'd been ignoring. But in those 11 minutes, he sat very still. "She seems better this week," Mrs. Dalton said. She was in the kitchen at 7 a.m. on a Monday, 2 weeks into Maya's time at the apartment. Ethan was getting his coffee, black, no sugar, the same as every morning. He didn't answer immediately. "She seems more—" Mrs. Dalton searched for a word that wouldn't open a conversation she wasn't authorized to have. "Present." Ethan drank his coffee, looked at the counter. "Has there been any deviation from the schedule?" "Small ones," Mrs. Dalton said carefully, "within appropriate margins." "I'll need specifics." She told him about the apple bread, about the extra 4 minutes at the park with the orange cat. He listened. Then he said, "Keep an eye on it," and went back to his study. Mrs. Dalton exhaled slowly through her nose. Keep an eye on it. She'd been keeping an eye on things in this apartment for 4 years. She'd watched this man eat standing at his counter 12 times a week. She'd watched Lily learn to set a table with the precision of a cadet before she was old enough to read. She'd watched seven nannies come and go, each one abraded down by the specific friction of this household until nothing was left. She'd been keeping an eye on it. What she knew, and what her job description prevented her from saying out loud, was that the apple bread hadn't just made Lily look present. It had made Ethan stand in a hallway for 4 minutes doing nothing. In 4 years, she had never once seen him do nothing. By week 3, something was happening to the mornings. Not dramatically, not in a way that could be pointed to or measured, but something. Lily had started appearing in the kitchen earlier than her schedule required. Maya, who arrived at 8, would find the little girl already there, sitting at the counter with her workbook, doing her morning exercises with the specific posture of someone who is technically doing what they're supposed to be doing while being somewhere else entirely, watching the kitchen door. "You're early," Maya said on the 3rd morning this happened. "I woke up," Lily said. "You could have stayed in bed." "I wasn't tired." Maya made 2 cups of hot chocolate, with actual cocoa and milk, not the packet kind, a thing she'd started doing without anyone's explicit permission, and set one in front of Lily and took the other to the opposite counter. They worked in the same room that way, Maya prepping whatever she was going to prep, Lily doing her morning workbook, the sound of pencil on paper, an occasional stirring, and the city outside. It was a small thing. It was nothing. It was probably the most normal thing happening in this apartment. On a Tuesday in early November, Lily looked up from her workbook and said without preamble, "Do you have a family?" Maya glanced at her. "Yes." "Parents?" "My grandmother. My parents died when I was in high school." Lily considered this with the same careful weight she brought to most things. "Did you miss them?" "Every day," Maya said. "For a long time it felt like something broken inside me that I kept waiting to get fixed. But eventually I figured out it wasn't going to get fixed. It was just," she thought about how to say it, "going to become part of me, like a scar. It's there. It's part of the shape of you, but you're still you." Lily was quiet for a while. Maya let her be quiet, didn't rush it. Then, "Did you cry?" "All the time." "My dad doesn't cry," Lily said. Not as a criticism, just a fact that she had observed and cataloged. "Some people can't," Maya said carefully, "or they think they can't. It's different for everyone." Another long pause. "I cry sometimes," Lily said. "At night, when he can't hear." Maya set down what she was holding, looked at this 7-year-old girl who cried quietly, at night, so her father couldn't hear, who learned to be silent in a silent house, who hummed jazz softly and then took it back. "That's okay," Maya said. "That's allowed." "Mrs. Dalton says I should use a tissue and not leave evidence on my pillow." Despite everything, Maya almost laughed. "That sounds like Mrs. Dalton." "She's not mean about it," Lily said quickly. I think she doesn't know what to do with it, so she gives me tissue advice." "That's very mature of you," Maya said. Understanding that about her, Lily looked back at her workbook. "I think a lot," she said simply. "There's a lot of time for it." But she found the drawings on a Thursday. She wasn't snooping. She was straightening Lily's room while Lily was with her tutor, a task Mrs. Dalton had asked her to help with because the housekeeper's schedule was doubled up that week. She found them the same way Mrs. Dalton had found them, tucked carefully under the mattress, a small stack of folded papers. She should have put them back immediately. She knew that. But she unfolded just one, the one on top, and stood there with it. It was a drawing of a woman, clearly drawn by a child. The proportions were childlike, the perspective flat, but detailed in a way that spoke to genuine concentration. The woman had long hair and was laughing, her arms open, and she was standing in what looked like a field of something, flowers maybe, or tall grass, Maya couldn't tell. At the top of the drawing, in careful block letters, "My mom." Below that, in smaller letters that looked like they'd been added later, like an afterthought, I think. Maya stood with this drawing for a long time. Then she folded it back exactly as it had been and tucked it back where she'd found it, and she sat on the edge of Lily's bed for a few minutes and looked at the alphabetized books and the lined-up stuffed animals and the small pink desk with the sharpened pencils. She thought about a little girl who drew pictures of a mother she never met and hid them under her mattress. She thought about a man 43 floors above Manhattan who had locked himself so tightly inside his own grief that his 7-year-old daughter had learned that grief was something to keep hidden. And she thought about her grandmother and the surgery date circled on her calendar at home and the number in her checking account and how many weeks she had left in this job and whether that math was going to work out. She got up. She went back to straightening the room. She put the pencils back in their row. Ethan began appearing in the kitchen at odd times. Not regularly, not in a pattern she could map. But on a Wednesday afternoon, when Maya and Lily were doing a reading exercise at the kitchen table, Lily reading aloud from a picture book while Maya listened and occasionally asked questions, she became aware, without turning around, that someone was in the kitchen doorway. She let it go, kept her eyes on Lily. Lily kept reading. She was at a part of the story that she found funny, something about a dog that kept knocking things over. And she made a small sound that was just barely a laugh. Not quite. More like the sound before a laugh, the intake of air that happens when the laugh is still deciding whether to happen. Maya said, "Keep going. You're doing great." Lily turned the page. In the doorway, Ethan Carter stood for about 90 seconds and then was gone. He didn't say anything. He didn't acknowledge that he'd been there. By evening, when Maya was packing up to leave, she passed the closed door of his study and could hear him on a call, his voice clipped and precise, speaking about quarterly projections, same as always. But the following Monday, she came in and found a new book on the kitchen counter. A picture book, not the type Lily's tutor would have assigned, but a newer one, something with a bright illustrated cover. There was no note. When Lily came in and saw it, she picked it up, read the title, looked at it with the careful diagnostic expression she brought to new information. "Where did this come from?" she asked Mrs. Dalton. Mrs. Dalton had the expression of someone who was choosing not to know things. "It was on the counter when I came in," she said. Lily looked at the book a moment longer, then she put it in her room. That night, Mrs. Dalton mentioned to Maya quietly while they were both tidying the kitchen after dinner. "He stayed in last night. He usually works till midnight. He was done by 9. Maya nodded slowly. "Okay." He walked past the living room twice. Lily was doing a puzzle. "She's been doing more puzzles," Maya said. "She's good at them." "Yes," Mrs. Dalton said. She paused. He didn't interrupt. He just walked by. "Okay," Maya said again. Mrs. Dalton nodded once in the manner of someone who has conveyed a message and considers it delivered. Maya took the recycling out. She stood in the service hallway for a moment, listening to the building around her. 43 floors of lives stacked on top of each other, each one its own contained world. He walked past the living room twice. She thought about a man who went from point A to point B in his own apartment, never pausing, never sitting, never deviating. She thought about what it meant that he had walked the same hallway twice in an evening, knowing his daughter was on the other side of a wall. She picked up the recycling bag. She went back inside. 3 weeks after Maya arrived, Lily laughed. Not the almost laugh from the reading exercise. Not the ghost of a smile at the corner of her mouth outside the bodega with the cat. A real one. It was a Saturday. Maya didn't work Saturdays, but she'd agreed to cover this particular one because Mrs. Dalton had a family thing. Lily had piano practice in the morning, and Maya sat in the music room while Lily played, which was something none of the previous nannies had apparently done. Just sat there, without reading or scrolling, just listening. Lily played her assigned pieces with the mechanical precision of someone executing a task. Then she stopped, looked at the piano. Then, very carefully, like someone walking out onto ice they're not sure will hold, she started playing something else. It was the jazz thing she'd hummed, except now she was playing it, piecing it together by ear, getting maybe half the notes right, and completely mangling the rhythm in a way that was charming and completely alive. She played it for about 30 seconds. Then she played it again, getting slightly more of it right. Then she played a bit that was clearly wrong, and she knew it was wrong, and she played it anyway. Maya said nothing. Lily played the wrong bit again, twisted it into something even more wrong, somehow funnier. She played a completely unhinged variation that bore no relationship to any piece of music that had ever been written. And then she laughed. It came out surprised, like it ambushed her, like it had been waiting in some part of her that didn't get much use, and it seized the moment. It was high and sudden and real. That particular type of child's laugh that is not performed for anyone. That is just the sound of something genuinely delighting a person who hasn't been delighted in a while. It lasted maybe 5 seconds. Then Lily heard herself, and the laugh stopped, and she straightened on the piano bench. Maya clapped, twice, slow. That was the best version of that I've ever heard. Lily turned around. Her face was flushed. It was wrong. It was perfect, Maya said. Those weren't the right notes. Nope, Lily stared at her. You're supposed to correct me. You weren't playing your lesson. You were playing your thing. Those are different categories. Lily thought about this with genuine seriousness. She turned back to the piano, played the normal assigned piece correctly, all the way through. Then she stopped. Maya, she said without turning around. Yeah? Do you think wrong notes can still be music? Maya thought about it. I think sometimes wrong notes are the best part. Lily was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said, very small, but something in it that had not been there before. Ethan's study was 2 rooms away, with a solid wall between them. But it was a Saturday, and he was home, and that laugh, that 5-second, surprised, ambushing laugh, had traveled through 2 rooms and a solid wall. He sat at his desk. His hands went still over his keyboard. He sat there for a long moment, looking at nothing. And something in his very carefully constructed chest did something that he hadn't allowed himself to feel in so long that he had almost forgotten it was possible. It cracked, not broke, not shattered, just the smallest fissure, the first one in 12 years. The fissure didn't announce itself. That was the thing about it. Ethan went back to his keyboard and typed the email he'd been composing and sent it and opened the next one. And by Monday morning, the weekend had been filed away in the part of his mind where he put things he didn't intend to examine. He was good at that. He'd had 12 years of practice. But the fissure was there. It didn't care whether he examined it or not. It showed up in small ways that he attributed to other things. He started taking his afternoon coffee standing at the kitchen window instead of at his desk. The view was the same building across the street, nothing remarkable. But he told himself it was good to step away from the screen periodically. He'd read something about eye strain. He started coming out of his study at odd hours, for water, for nothing, moving through the apartment the way you move through a space when you're not going anywhere specific but you need to be moving. He noticed the smell of the kitchen more. He noticed the sounds. On a Wednesday afternoon, he came out for water and heard from 2 rooms away Maya's voice saying something he couldn't make out, and then Lily's laugh. Smaller than the one on Saturday, a normal everyday laugh, the kind that kids make when something is briefly funny and then move on. And he stood in the hallway holding a glass he'd filled and forgotten about. And he stood there for what was probably too long. He drank the water. He went back to work. He told himself nothing was changing. The thing about telling yourself nothing is changing is that you have to keep telling yourself, which is itself a kind of evidence. Thursday came, and with it, the park walk. Ethan didn't usually track the park walks. They were on the schedule. They happened. That was sufficient. But he found himself at the window at 3:15, the approximate time Maya and Lily would be returning, and he watched the street below until he saw them come around the corner. 43 floors was too high to read expressions, but he could see the way they moved. Lily walking close to Maya's side, not the usual 2 steps ahead and very proper walk she did with the previous nannies. Close, and they were moving slowly, which meant they were talking. He watched until they went through the building's entrance. He told himself he'd been looking at the traffic. When Lily came in, she came directly to his study, as she always did, the end-of-day check-in, another item on the laminated schedule. She knocked twice and waited. "Come in," he said. She opened the door and stood in the doorway in her coat, her cheeks still pink from the outside air. She looked different. He couldn't isolate the variable. She looked the same as she always did, same coat, same braids, same careful posture. But something was going on behind her eyes that hadn't been going on before. Some small, active processing of the world that felt new. "How was the park?" he asked. He always asked. She always said fine. "We saw the cat again," she said. "Mrs. Dalton told me his name is actually Marcus. The bodega owner told her." "Marcus," Ethan repeated. "It's a good name for him. He has a very serious face." She paused. "We got him a treat. Maya had one in her pocket. She said she'd been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the right time." Ethan absorbed this. The image of Maya carrying a cat treat in her pocket for 2 weeks, waiting, was not something he'd anticipated. "Did he like it?" he asked, before he could decide not to. Lily's face did the thing where it almost smiled. He was very dignified about it. He smelled it for a long time before he ate it, like he was deciding whether it was beneath him. There was a beat of silence, the kind of silence that could go multiple ways. "That sounds like a Marcus thing to do," Ethan said. Lily looked at him. For a moment, something very direct crossed her face, and something searching, like she was looking for a door in a familiar wall. Then it was gone, and she said, "Good night, Dad," and went down the hallway to her room. Ethan turned back to his desk. He sat there for a while. Marcus, he thought, despite himself. Ultimad. Maya was on the phone with her grandmother every evening after she got home. Her grandmother's name was Ruth, 81 years old, living alone in a rent-controlled apartment in Bushwick that smelled of ginger and old books, with a heart that had been malfunctioning quietly for 2 years and was now, according to 2 different cardiologists, doing it loudly enough to be classified as urgent. The surgery was non-negotiable. The timeline was 6 weeks. The cost, after insurance that wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, was $43,000. Maya had $840 in her checking account. "How was the job?" Ruth asked on a Thursday night. She had a voice that had never lost its Louisiana inflection, low and warm, the kind of voice that belonged in a kitchen. "It's fine," Maya said. She was eating leftovers standing at her counter, a habit she'd developed in her 20s that she kept meaning to break. "It's a strange house." "Strange how?" "Quiet, in a way that feels like it costs something." She thought about how to explain it. Like someone decided that quiet was safer than noise, and the whole house agreed. "And the child?" "She's 7, and she cries at night, so her father can't hear." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "Lord," she said softly. "She's funny, though. She's got this dry, careful way of looking at things, like she's taking notes." "And the father?" Maya was quiet for a beat too long. "Maya. He's..." She moved the leftover container, looked at the window. "He's someone who's been standing still for a long time and doesn't know it, like how a river freezes and doesn't realize it stopped being a river." "That's a lot of insight for 3 weeks." "I notice things." "You always did," Ruth said. "Your mother was the same way." A pause. "You like this job?" "I need this job," Maya said. "Careful." "That's not what I said." Maya didn't answer. "Be careful," Ruth said. Not as a warning exactly, more as a thing she needed to say to feel she'd said it. "I know," Maya said. After she hung up, she stood at the counter for a while in her quiet apartment, which was also quiet, but a different kind of quiet, the comfortable kind that comes from a space being your own. And thought about her grandmother's surgery date and her checking account in the 6 weeks between now and the deadline, and then she washed her container and went to bed. She didn't let herself think about the way Ethan Carter had stood in the hallway on that Saturday. She was good at that, too. She'd had to be. The library was not on the schedule. It was Maya's idea, and she ran it through Mrs. Dalton rather than requesting explicit permission, which was a tactical choice because Mrs. Dalton had a pragmatic relationship with the rules of the household and a soft spot for Lily that she expressed primarily through efficient problem-solving. Maya explained that Lily had run out of appropriate reading material, which was technically true, and that the nearest public library was 3 blocks from the park route, which was also true. Mrs. Dalton looked at her for a long moment. "Put it on the schedule," Mrs. Dalton said, meaning do it and document it so that if it becomes a problem, there is paperwork. So on a Tuesday, they went to the library. The Andrew High School Braille and Talking Book Library was not technically the closest branch, but Maya knew it and liked it. And more importantly, it had a children's section with armchairs and low shelving and the specific air of a place that took reading seriously without making it intimidating. She'd been coming here since she was 12, dragging herself from Bushwick on 2 trains. Lily walked in and stopped. She stopped the way she'd stopped in front of the cat in the bodega window. Total stillness, like her internal operating system had paused to process incoming information. Her eyes moved across the room, the shelves, the colors on the spines, a reading table where a boy about her age was sprawled across a beanbag with a book held over his face. "We can get library cards," Maya said. "You can take books home." "I have books at home," Lily said. But it came out uncertain, like she was questioning it at the same time she said it. "These are different." "How?" Maya thought about it honestly. "Your books at home were chosen for you. These ones you choose yourself." Lily looked at the shelves, looked at Maya. Then she walked into the children's section with the deliberate step of someone making a decision. She was in there for 45 minutes. Maya sat in one of the armchairs near the door and watched Lily move through the stacks, pulling books out, reading the back covers, putting them back, pulling out others. She talked to the librarian, a young woman with elaborate braids who crouched down to Lily's level without being asked and pulled 3 books from a shelf she apparently knew by heart and handed them over with the confidence of someone who had matched children to books for years. Lily came out with 4 books and a library card with her name on it. On the walk home, she held the books against her chest with both arms. She didn't say anything for a block. Then, "The librarian said the book on top is about a girl who becomes an astronomer in the 1800s. She says it's not sad, but important things happen." "Sounds good," Maya said. She said not sad specifically, which means it might be a little sad. "Maybe. Is that okay?" Lily considered. "I think so. I think I can be a little sad about a book." "Yeah," Maya said. "That's what books are for sometimes." They walked another half block. "Maya," Lily said. "Yeah?" "Do you think my dad would like any of these?" Maya looked down at her. Lily was watching the sidewalk, not looking up, which meant she'd asked the question sideways, the way she always approached things that mattered. "I think he might like the astronomy one," Maya said carefully. "He seems like someone who likes precision." Lily nodded slowly. "He reads reports mostly, for work. I see them on his desk when I bring him his coffee in the morning." "You bring him coffee?" "Every morning. He doesn't ask me to. I know he forgets to get up and get it, and it gets cold, so I bring it." She said this with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who has arranged their life around small acts of care that they've never named. "He always says thank you. He looks surprised every time, which is funny because I've been doing it for 2 years. Maya absorbed that. A 7-year-old who had been surprising her father every morning for 2 years with a cup of coffee, and a man who was surprised by it every time. Not because he forgot, but because he could not quite believe it. "Maybe leave the book on his desk sometime," Maya said. "Not a big thing, just leave it there." Lily was quiet. "Or not," Maya said. "Just a thought." They turned onto their block. The doorman saw them coming and held the door, and Lily walked through holding her library books. That evening, after dinner, Mrs. Dalton saw Lily go into her room and come out again with the astronomy book. She walked to her father's study door, stood there for a moment. Then she knocked. "Come in," said Ethan. Mrs. Dalton from the kitchen couldn't hear what was said, but she heard Lily's voice, brief and low, and Ethan's response, also brief, a short exchange. The study door didn't close again for another 12 minutes. When Lily came back down the hall, she wasn't carrying the book. She went to her room. Mrs. Dalton busied herself with dishes, but later, when she brought Ethan his late evening tea, a ritual she'd maintained for years, a thing he accepted without acknowledging, she saw the astronomy book open on his desk, face down to keep the page. He was on the phone, turned toward the window. He didn't look at her. She set the tea down and left. She walked back to the kitchen with the particular expression of someone who is quietly, privately, and very carefully hopeful about something they refuse to say out loud. The fracture in the routine happened because of rain. It was a Friday afternoon in mid-November, 2.5 weeks after the library visit, and the park walk was on the schedule. Maya and Lily were in the elevator going down when the sky outside the lobby windows went from gray to genuinely hostile, the kind of November rain that arrives sideways and has opinions about coats. They stood in the lobby looking at it. "We should go back up," Lily said. She sounded like she was reading from a manual. "The schedule says park walk," Maya said. Lily looked at her. "It's raining. It's definitely raining. We can't do the park walk in the rain." "No," Maya agreed. "We can't." She looked at the rain, then at Lily. "What do you want to do instead?" Lily blinked. This was apparently not a question she received often. "What are the options?" "Anything in a 3-block radius, or we go back up. Your call." Lily stared at the rain like she was doing calculations. Then she said, "There's a place. I see it from the car sometimes. It has a red door." Maya had a reasonable idea what she was talking about. "Pietro's?" "I don't know the name. It has a red door and the window is always fogged up and there are people inside and it smells like bread when you walk past." "That's Pietro's," Maya said. "It's a bakery. They have soup in winter." Lily looked at her, then at the rain, then at the door. "Okay," she said. "Pietro's." They ran through the rain, both of them, Lily holding her coat over her head with her hands like a tent. Maya's umbrella turned inside out approximately 15 seconds after she opened it. By the time they got to Pietro's red door, they were damp across the shoulders and the knees, and when they stepped inside, the warmth hit them both at the same time. That specific warmth of a bakery in November, yeast and sugar and warm air that settles on your skin like something solid. The place was small and loud and run by a man in his 60s named, presumably, Pietro, who moved behind the counter with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 40 years and found all of it still worth doing. There were 8 small tables, most of them occupied, and a glass case of pastries and a chalkboard with soup options. Lily stood just inside the door and looked at all of it. "Table or counter?" Maya asked. "Counter," Lily said, like she'd already decided. They sat at the counter. Pietro came over, looked at the state of them, mildly damp, umbrella broken, and said without any preliminary, "Minestrone or lentil?" "Both," Maya said. He looked at Lily. "You want cocoa with that?" "You look like a cocoa situation." Lily considered him seriously. "Yes, please," she said. He went away. Lily looked at the glass case of pastries, at the chalkboard, at the couple at the table behind them who were having an argument about something in fast Italian that neither of them spoke, at the rain on the window. "This is different," she said. "From what?" "From—" She gestured vaguely upward. "The apartment, the marble, the systematic everything." "All of it." "Yeah," Maya said, "it is." "Do you like this better?" Lily asked. "Than up there?" Maya was careful. "I like both for different reasons." "What do you like up there?" "I like—" She thought honestly. "I like you. I like Mrs. Dalton pretending she doesn't have feelings while she very obviously has all of them. I like the view in the mornings." A pause. "I like that your dad got 4 chapters into that astronomy book." Lily's head turned sharply. "He told you that?" "He didn't have to. I can see the bookmark." Lily was quiet. The soup arrived, 2 bowls, immediately steaming, accompanied by bread that had been torn from a loaf rather than sliced. Pietro set the cocoa in front of Lily without ceremony and went back to work. Lily looked at the torn bread. She picked up a piece and held it for a moment like she wasn't sure what to do with torn bread, like it violated some expectation she didn't know she had. Then she ate it. "It's better like this," she said, surprised. "Torn bread usually is." They ate. The Italian argument behind them resolved into laughter. The rain hit the window in sheets and then relented and then came back. Lily ate her soup with more appetite than Maya had ever seen her bring to a meal, which was saying something because Lily was generally a careful, methodical eater. Halfway through, Lily said, "My dad used to come to places like this." Maya looked at her. "He told you that?" "No, I saw a picture." In his desk drawer. I wasn't snooping, I was looking for tape. There was a picture of him when he was younger, maybe my age. He was at a table somewhere that looked like this, with a woman. She paused. I think it was my grandmother, his mother. She died when I was a baby. That's a lot of people to lose, Maya said quietly. Yes, Lily said. She stirred her soup. He doesn't go to places like this anymore. He goes to restaurants with tablecloths for business. Mrs. Dalton told me. What do you think about that? Lily thought about it with her characteristic seriousness. I think he used to be different, she said, before all the things happened. She looked up. Do you think people can go back to who they were before? The question landed with more weight than a 7-year-old should have been able to throw. No, Maya said. She kept her voice even. I don't think you can go back to who you were before, but I think you can go forward to someone who has some of the same things. Someone who can sit in a place with a red door and eat torn bread. Lily looked at her for a long moment. That's a very careful answer, she said. You asked a very careful question. Lily went back to her soup. Outside, the rain decided it was done and moved on, leaving the street clean and gray and quiet. Pietro came by and refilled Lily's cocoa without being asked. She said thank you, and he nodded, and that was the whole transaction. On the way back, the sidewalk was wet, and the air smelled like rain and city, and Lily held her library book inside her coat to keep it dry. She didn't talk for most of the walk, but when they got to the building and the doorman held the door, she stopped just inside and turned to Maya. Can we come back here? She asked. To Pietro's. Sure, Maya said. Not instead of the park, in addition to sometimes. I'll run it through Mrs. Dalton. The edge of Lily's mouth moved. She'll laminate a new schedule. Definitely, Maya agreed. Lily went to the elevator. Maya followed. They rode up in companionable quiet, and the numbers ticked up, and somewhere between the 35th and the 43rd floor, Lily said, not to Maya, just into the middle distance, I think my dad would like Pietro's. Maya said nothing, but she thought, yeah, I think he probably would. The thing about Ethan was that he watched without understanding that he was watching. He was a man trained in observation. He'd built a financial empire in part by reading rooms, reading people, identifying what wasn't being said and what wasn't being shown, and acting on that information before anyone else did. It was a professional instinct, refined over 10 years, and it worked with ruthless efficiency in boardrooms. It worked considerably less well on his own life. He noticed things, in the way he always noticed things, cataloged them, filed them, attributed them to external variables. He noticed that Lily finished her dinner more evenings than before. He noticed that she'd started leaving books in the living room, not put away on shelves, but left open, face down, mid-read, the way you leave a book when you intend to come back to it. He noticed that she hummed sometimes in the mornings, faint and distracted, not any piece from her lesson plan. He noticed that his apartment smelled different now, on days when Maya was there. Not dramatically, just warmer. Some combination of whatever she cooked for lunch and something she apparently used on her hands, something faintly like vanilla, that lingered in rooms after she'd been in them. He noticed that he'd started going to bed at 10 instead of 12:30. He attributed all of these things to other things, and he was good at that. And the attributions held up right until the Tuesday afternoon in late November when he walked into the kitchen for the 3rd time that day. Water, he told himself, water. And found Maya teaching Lily how to make bread. Not apple bread, regular bread, yeast bread. The kind that requires kneading, which meant Lily had flour up to her elbows, and on her face, and on the kitchen counter, and on the floor, in a small radius around where she was standing, and she was laughing at something Maya had just said, and her braids were coming undone, and she did not appear to notice or care. Ethan stood in the doorway. Maya had her back to him, shaping her piece of dough. Lily was looking at her, trying to copy the motion, not quite getting it, too much in her wrists, not enough in the heel of her hand, making a shape that would absolutely not produce anything edible. She looked up at Maya for correction. Maya adjusted her hands. Lily tried again and got it slightly more wrong, and something about the gap between her effort and her result struck her as funny, and she laughed again. The same laugh as the piano room, that surprised, ambushing thing. It's not working, Lily said. It's working great, Maya said. The bread is going to be terrible. Probably. First bread usually is. You're learning what it feels like. What it feels like. You can't make bread without understanding what the dough tells you. It's different every time. Warm day, cold day, humid, dry. It all changes how it behaves. You have to learn to read it. Lily kneaded with great suspicion. How do you read bread? You pay attention. Lily paid attention to her dough with the intense focus she brought to everything that mattered to her, brow furrowed, completely absorbed. Ethan stood in the doorway. He didn't know how long he stood there. Long enough that at some point Maya, without turning around, without stopping what she was doing, said, "There's coffee if you want some." He was so caught off guard that he almost didn't respond. "I was just water. I know. It's in the tap." She glanced back over her shoulder, briefly, not long enough to hold. "Coffee's on the left burner. It's the good kind. Mrs. Dalton gets it." He came into the kitchen. He got himself a cup of coffee, which he had not planned to do. He stood at the counter, a reasonable distance from the flour situation, and drank it. Lily looked up at him. She had a streak of flour across her left cheek. She looked, for one moment, exactly like a 7-year-old child, with no performance in it at all. "We're making bread," she said. "I can see that." "It's going to be terrible." Maya says first bread usually is. Lily considered this. Then, apparently deciding that that was sufficient for social interaction, she went back to her dough. Ethan drank his coffee. Maya shaped her piece and set it to rest under a cloth and moved around to look at Lily's. "That's actually better," Maya said, inspecting it. "Really?" "Yeah. Feel that? The tension there? That's what you want." Lily felt it. Her face went through a progression of expressions, skeptical, then surprised, then something close to satisfied. "Oh," she said, "I feel it. That's it." Ethan watched his daughter discover the tension in bread dough with an expression on his face that he would not have been able to name. Something that was not grief exactly, though grief was part of it. Something that was recognition, maybe. Something that was, this is what she should have had all along, and the corollary that followed it that he couldn't finish. He set his coffee cup down. "I have a call," he said. Maya glanced back again. "Sure," she said. Just that. He went back to his study, sat at his desk. Did not make the call he'd claimed to have for another 20 minutes. When the bread came out, 2 hours later, and against all odds, not actually terrible, Mrs. Dalton brought him a piece on a small plate. He looked at it. It was slightly lopsided and probably denser than ideal, and absolutely, unmistakably, made by a 7-year-old learning what her hands could do. He ate all of it. He did not tell anyone that. The shift, when it became undeniable, happened on a Wednesday. He'd been on a call with his legal team from 7 to 9 p.m., a call about a land acquisition in Jersey City that had become complicated in the ways that these things always became complicated. And by the time he was off the phone, he was irritated in the particular way that legal complications made him irritated. Not angry, just compressed, like everything had been squeezed down into a smaller space than it wanted to occupy. He came out of his study to get water, this time actually intending to get water, and found Lily's room door half open and light coming through it. It was after 9. She was supposed to be asleep. He pushed the door open. Lily was in bed, yes, but she was reading, and she looked up when he came in with the deer-caught expression of a child who knows they have been caught doing something technically against the rules and is assessing how bad this is going to be. He looked at her. She was reading the astronomy book. "It's past 9, he said. "I know," she said. "I wanted to know what happens to Cecilia Payne." "Who?" Lily held up the book, Maya's library book, the one about the astronomer in the 1800s. "She figured out what stars are made of, and then someone else took credit for it," she said. "I need to know how it ends." Ethan looked at his daughter in her bed with her astronomy book, her braids loose from the day, a look of genuine investment on her face that he didn't often see. Not the polished, careful Lily, just Lily, annoyed on behalf of a woman who'd been dead for decades. He came and sat on the edge of the bed, a thing he did occasionally, had done since she was small, when the evening check-in extended into something longer. But he hadn't done it in a while. He wasn't sure how long. What happens to her? He asked. Lily turned the page. She proves it, about the stars. But she has to keep doing the work even after they take the credit, because she loves it more than she hates what they did. He started to say impressive and stopped. Said instead, that's a hard thing to do. Maya says some people love things bigger than their wounds. He looked at his daughter. Lily was still looking at the book. Maya says that? He said. Yesterday, at Pietro's. She glanced up. It's the bakery with the red door. We went when it rained. She says we can go on the second Tuesday of every month. It's on the new schedule. I see. Lily turned another page, read for a moment, then, Dad? Yeah. Why don't you go anywhere anymore? Like regular places. With red doors. He was quiet. The question was so direct and so small that there was no diplomatic deflection available. I go places, he said finally. Restaurants with tablecloths, Lily said. For work. Mrs. Dalton, he thought. I've been busy, he said. Lily looked at him then. The full look, the direct one, with all the 7-year-old's unnerving capacity to see through insufficient answers. You're always busy, she said. But I think it's different from busy. I think you just... She searched for the word. Stopped going. He had nothing for that. Maya says you can want to go somewhere and also be afraid of it at the same time, Lily said. That both things can be true. When did she say that? She says things sometimes when she's not talking to me. She was cooking and I was reading, and she just said it out loud. He absorbed this. The image of Maya cooking and thinking out loud and not knowing she had an audience. The image of his daughter collecting these things the way she collected everything, carefully, quietly, under the mattress of her attention. You should finish your chapter, he said. Then lights out. 2 chapters, Lily said. 1. 1.5. He looked at her. She looked at him with the absolute composed calm of someone who had already decided the negotiation was going her way. 1, he said, and a half. Lily returned to her book with the satisfied expression of someone who had achieved the goal they'd set out for. Ethan stood and moved toward the door. Dad? Lily said, without looking up. Pietro's is 3 blocks from here. They're open Saturday mornings. He stood at the door. I have calls on Saturdays, he said. From what time? He almost said all morning, which was what he usually said, what he always said. The reflexive, airtight Saturday block that meant he never had to decide anything about Saturday mornings because they were already accounted for. 10, he said instead. My first call is at 10. Lily turned a page. Pietro's opens at 7:30, she said. Very casually, eyes on the book. He stood there. Good night, Lily, he said. Good night, Dad. He walked back down the hallway, stood in his study doorway for a moment. Then he went in and sat at his desk and pulled up his Saturday schedule on his screen and looked at it for a long time. He moved the 9 o'clock call to 9:30. It was a small movement. Nobody would notice. He barely noticed. But he sat there after he'd done it in the quiet apartment and felt something he hadn't felt in so long it took him a while to recognize it. He was looking forward to something as small as a bakery with a red door, something as small as Saturday morning. He closed his laptop. He went to bed at 9:50. That was the Wednesday that things became undeniable, even to Ethan Carter, who had spent 12 years making things deniable. The crack was there. And things were beginning, slowly, against his will, without asking his permission, to come through it. Saturday came the way things come when you've let yourself want them, slightly faster than expected and with more weight. Ethan was up at 6:15, which was normal. He was dressed by 6:40, which was also normal. But by 7, he was standing in his kitchen drinking coffee he didn't taste, watching the clock on the microwave with the specific restlessness of someone who has made a small decision they can't take back and is now living in the aftermath of it. He'd moved a call. He'd told himself it was logistical. He'd told himself a great many things since Wednesday night, and none of them had quite stuck. At 7:22, Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway in her coat. She was already dressed, braids done. She had her library book under one arm. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything about Pietro's, or about Wednesday night, or about the moved call, because none of those things needed to be said. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she said. They went down together in the elevator. Not the private one to the vestibule, but the regular residential elevator, which Ethan almost never used. A woman from the 38th floor got on at 39 and did the thing people did when they recognized him, a small recalibration, a careful non-staring. He nodded, she nodded. Lily read her book. On the sidewalk, the November air was cold and clean, and Ethan turned up his collar and Lily pulled her coat tighter, and they walked 3 blocks through the early Saturday quiet of the Upper East Side. Shops just opening. A man walking 2 dogs who stopped and tangled their leads. A food cart sending up steam into the cold air. The red door of Pietro's was unlocked, the window already fogged from inside. Pietro was behind the counter. He looked up when they came in, registered Lily with the easy recognition of someone who remembers the people who come through his door, and then registered Ethan, and did absolutely nothing with that, which Ethan appreciated more than he could have explained. No recalibration, no careful non-staring, just a look that said, 2 people, Saturday morning, what do you need? "She's back," Pietro said to Lily. "You bring someone." "My dad," Lily said. "Sit anywhere," Pietro said. They sat at the counter. Lily put her book down and looked at the chalkboard. The pastry board was different from the weekday board. More things on it. A handwritten note about a cardamom roll that had run out 3 times in the previous 2 weeks. Ethan looked at the same board and thought about when he had last been in a room where the menu was on a chalkboard. He couldn't remember. "The cocoa is good," Lily said to him, without fanfare. "Just information." "Is it?" "Pietro doesn't use the packet kind." She said it with the authority of someone who had personally investigated this. Pietro came over, looked at Ethan. "Coffee?" "Please." "Espresso or American?" "American." He paused. "Actually, espresso." Pietro nodded like this was the correct answer and went away. Lily opened her book. Ethan looked at the room. 7 tables, most of them occupied. A couple at the window sharing something from the same plate. An older man alone with a newspaper that was actual paper. An actual physical newspaper, which Ethan hadn't seen someone read in years. The Italian argument couple from Lily's description weren't there, wrong morning, but there was a kind of ease in the room that Ethan recognized as something he hadn't been inside in a long time. Not the formal ease of restaurants he frequented, which was a performance. This was actual ease. People sitting in a warm room eating things they chose because they wanted to eat them, without occasion. He'd forgotten that this existed. "Maya was right," Lily said, eyes on her book. "About what?" "She said you'd like this place. She said you seemed like someone who used to go to places like this." Ethan turned his coffee cup in his hands. "She said that." "She says things she doesn't always know I'm hearing," Lily said. Not accusatory, just factual. "What else does she say?" Lily considered, with the ethical weight of someone deciding what to share. "She talks to herself when she's cooking. About ingredients, mostly. Sometimes she says things like," she paused, "like she's working something out." "Working what out?" Lily looked at him then. The direct look, the full one. "I think she worries about something at home," she said. "She gets a look sometimes when she checks her phone, like something is waiting for her and she doesn't know if it's going to be okay." Ethan sat with that. He knew Maya lived alone, in Bushwick. That was in her file. He knew she'd worked 2 jobs before this one. He hadn't thought beyond the information that was relevant to the hire. He realized, sitting in Pietro's on a Saturday morning, that he had not thought about Maya as a person with things waiting for her at home. He had thought about her. He'd thought about her more than he intended to, more than was professional, more than was advisable. But he'd thought about her in the context of his apartment, his daughter, the shift she was generating in the atmosphere of his life. He hadn't thought about what was happening in hers. "Here," Pietro said, setting down the espresso and Lily's cocoa, and without being asked, a cardamom roll on a small plate between them. "We didn't order," Ethan started. "Last one," Pietro said. "I can't have it sitting there. It makes the other pastries feel bad." He went back to the counter. Lily looked at the cardamom roll, then at her father. "You should have the first piece," she said. "You've never been here before." He broke it in half and gave her the larger piece. She ate it with the same attention she'd brought to the apple bread on her first week, that focused, paying attention way, like she was cataloging it. Then she said, "We should bring Maya here sometime." He looked at his espresso. "This was your idea this morning." "I know, but she should see that it worked." A pause. "She'll be happy that it worked." He drank his coffee. "It was good. Better than good. The kind of espresso that reminded you that espresso was supposed to taste like something." He sat in Pietro's on a Saturday morning with flour probably still in the air from the week before, and a cardamom roll going between him and his daughter, and the newspaper man turning a page 2 tables over. And he thought about Maya in her apartment in Bushwick, and whatever was waiting for her there, and whether she knew that something was working. He thought, very briefly and without meaning to, about what her face looked like when she was thinking. He finished his coffee. He ordered another. The first Saturday at Pietro's led, with the illogical but undeniable logic of small things, to a second Saturday, and then a third. By the fourth Saturday in December, Pietro no longer asked what they wanted. He just brought 2 coffees, a cocoa, and whatever was left of the morning special, which was either a pastry or a small plate of something warm, and he put it between them and went away. The third Saturday was when Lily said, "Do you think Mom would have liked it here?" And the question landed in the air between them with the weight of everything that hadn't been said in 7 years. Ethan went still. Not obviously. He didn't show it in his face, but his hand stopped moving on his coffee cup. "I think so," he said, carefully. "What was she like?" Lily asked. It was not the first time she'd asked this. She'd asked before over the years, and he'd answered with facts. She was kind. She was very smart. She studied literature at Columbia, facts that were true and said nothing. This time something in him, the fissure, or what had gotten into it, didn't immediately reach for the facts. "She was loud," he said. Lily looked at him. That was not a fact he'd given before. Not mean loud, just... He looked at the window. She had opinions about everything, and she didn't see any reason to keep them at a conversational volume. She would have argued with Pietro about his pastry choices. She would have told him the cardamom roll needed more cardamom, and he would have either thrown her out or hired her. Lily was very still. She was the kind of still that was actually the opposite of still, the still of someone absorbing something at high speed. "Did she laugh a lot?" Lily asked. "All the time," Ethan said. He said it before he could stop it. She laughed at things nobody else found funny. Quiet things. She'd see something, some small thing, a look on someone's face or a word in a menu, and she'd just start laughing, and it would take her a minute to explain it, and by the time she explained it, you were laughing too, even if it wasn't that funny. Lily was quiet for a long moment. "I have her laugh," Lily said, "very small." He looked at his daughter. "Mrs. Dalton told me," Lily said, "a long time ago. She said she could hear it sometimes, and it sounded the same." He looked at his daughter and felt something move through him that was not manageable, not the controlled, filed-away version of grief he'd been maintaining for 12 years, but the actual thing, loose and honest and not interested in being managed. He felt it in his chest and behind his eyes, and he sat with it for a moment in Pietro's on a Saturday morning because there was nowhere to put it. "She'd have been crazy about you," he said finally. His voice came out slightly different than he'd intended. He cleared his throat. "She'd have let you make a mess of the kitchen every day and argued with your tutors, and you'd have been up reading until midnight and she wouldn't have enforced the schedule, and I'd have been the one." He stopped. Almost laughed at the image of it, at what that life would have looked like, at the specific comedy of him trying to maintain order in a house with a woman like Claire in it. Lily was looking at him very carefully. "You almost laughed," she said. "No, I didn't." "You did. You made the face." "I don't have a face." "You have a face," Lily said, with absolute certainty. "It goes like this." And she did something with her expression that was a surprisingly accurate impression of the thing his face did when something caught him off guard and almost got through. Compressed, slightly surprised, the corners of something moving. He looked at his daughter doing an impression of his face, and the thing that had been almost laughing a moment ago got slightly closer to actually laughing, and he pressed it back down. "Eat your roll," he said. Lily ate her roll with the expression of someone who has scored a point and is being gracious about it. On the walk home, the same 3 blocks, same cold air, same Saturday quiet, she slipped her hand into his without preamble. The way small children do, automatic and unannounced, because it's cold and you're walking and hands exist for holding. He held it. He didn't say anything about it. Neither did she. The recital was Margaret Whitfield's idea. Margaret Whitfield was the kind of woman who collected charitable causes the way other people collected art, with an eye for what would reflect best on the collector. She ran a foundation that supported arts education in Manhattan schools, genuinely useful as these things went. And she organized a biennial student recital that brought together young pianists from across the city in a showcase that was as much about the parents as it was about the children. The venue was the Kimberly Room at the Langford Hotel, a space that held 300 people and had genuinely good acoustics and a Steinway that cost more than most cars. Margaret called Ethan's office on a Tuesday in early December. "Lily's been taking lessons with Julian Mercer for 2 years," Margaret said, in the tone of someone who has already decided the answer and is presenting the question as a formality. "Julian tells me she's exceptional. The recital is December 22nd. It would mean so much to the foundation to have her participate." Ethan had his doubts. Not about Lily's playing. She was good, genuinely good, with the kind of musical ear that her teacher called unusual and her father called unexplained. But about Lily on a stage in front of 300 people, performing precision for an audience that would be watching not just the child but the father. He told Margaret he'd think about it. He told Lily about it that evening, framing it neutrally, leaving it as her choice. Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to do it." That surprised him. "You're sure?" "I want to play in a real room." She thought about it. "I want to hear what it sounds like when it goes somewhere. Right now I only play in the apartment and the sound just stays. I want to know what it sounds like when it goes out." He looked at her. This was not the logic of a child who was performing an appropriate ambition. This was something genuine. "Okay," he said. "I'll tell Margaret yes." What he didn't anticipate was Lily's next question. "Can Maya come?" He paused. "She's not—" He started to say she's not family, which was technically accurate and felt, sitting in his own mouth, like a dishonest thing to say. "She doesn't usually—" "I want her there," Lily said. Quiet, but absolute. "I play better when she's listening." He looked at his daughter. She looked back at him with the calm, direct face she'd developed over the past weeks. Not the careful face, not the performing contentment face, but the actual Lily face, the one that had opinions and wasn't going to retreat from them. "I'll ask her," he said. He asked Maya the following morning, in the kitchen, while she was making Lily's lunch. He stood in the doorway, his default position, he was beginning to notice, doorways of rooms Maya was in, and said, without preamble, "Lily has a recital on the 22nd. She'd like you there." Maya turned from the counter. "The Whitfield recital? You know it?" "I know of it. Julian Mercer is a good teacher." She looked at him steadily. "She wants me there." "Yes." A pause. He watched her think about it. Not about whether she wanted to go, he could see she wanted to go, but about something else. About what it meant, probably. About lines and categories and the fact that nannies don't typically attend high society recitals as invited guests. "Okay," she said. "I'll be there." He nodded, started to move away from the doorway. "Mr. Carter." He turned. "Is she nervous?" "Lily?" He thought about it honestly. "I don't think so. She seems decided." Something crossed Maya's face. "Good," she said, quietly and with a warmth in it that she wasn't directing at him exactly, but that he was standing close enough to feel anyway. He went back to his study. He sat at his desk. He moved 3 things on his calendar to accommodate the 22nd. The 2 weeks between the announcement of the recital and the night of it were the most alive the Carter apartment had been in 12 years, and nobody stated that out loud, but everyone understood it. Julian Mercer arrived twice a week for extended sessions now, and the music room was occupied for 3 hours at a stretch, and from anywhere in the apartment you could hear Lily practicing. The assigned piece, which was a Clementi sonatina that Julian had selected for its technical demands and its reputation among the Whitfield recital crowd, a perfectly respectable choice, a piece that would demonstrate skill and preparation and everything an audience expected. But sometimes, in the evenings, after Julian was gone, Lily played something else. Ethan heard it for the first time on a Wednesday night, late, when he was coming out for water at 11, and the apartment should have been silent. Instead, from the music room, came something that was not the Clementi, something low and wandering and jazz-adjacent, pieced together by ear, still imperfect, but more formed than it had been on that Saturday weeks ago when Lily had played it and caught herself and stopped. Now she didn't stop. He stood in the hallway and listened. It wasn't technically accomplished. There were wrong notes, and rhythm was approximate at best. But there was something in it that the Clementi, technically correct as it was, didn't have. Something that was actually Lily, playing the thing she wanted to play. The song she'd heard from a kitchen radio and couldn't let go of. He stood in the hallway and listened until she stopped, and then he went and got his water and went to bed. The next morning, he didn't mention it. But at breakfast, they'd started having breakfast together on weekdays, another small thing that had accumulated into a habit. He said, "What is that piece? The one you play in the evenings?" Lily looked up from her yogurt. Something cautious crossed her face. "You heard that?" "Sound travels in this apartment." She considered him, decided. "I don't know what it's called. Maya is trying to find it. She says she'll recognize it if she hears it. We've been going through things on her phone." "What does it sound like to you?" Lily thought about this seriously. "Like something that doesn't care if anyone is listening," she said. "Like it would sound the same in an empty room." He drank his coffee. "That's a good thing," he said. Lily looked at him with the careful attention she brought to any unexpected thing he said. Then she went back to her yogurt. The night of the 22nd was cold and clear, the kind of December night in Manhattan where the city looks sharp-edged and the lights cut across the dark like they mean it. The Langford Hotel blazed at its entrance, a small crowd moving through the doors in good coats, and the lobby smelled of the forced warm air of large buildings and winter perfume, and something that was the general smell of people who had the money to be here. Ethan arrived with Lily at 7:15. He'd planned to arrive at 7:30, but Lily had been ready at 6:50, sitting on the couch in her dress. Dark green, her choice, not what his stylist had pulled for the occasion, with her hands in her lap and her back straight. And there was no reason to make her wait. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. Those were different things. Maya was already in the lobby when they arrived. She'd come on her own, her choice. She'd declined the offer of the car, which Ethan had offered because it was the logistically sensible thing, he told himself, and not because he'd wanted to offer it. She was wearing a dark red dress he hadn't seen before, her hair down, and she looked like herself, say, not like she was trying to disappear into the room and not like she was trying to occupy more of it than she owned. Just herself, in a room that wasn't her usual room, standing the way she always stood. Lily saw her first and crossed the lobby at a pace that was just short of running. "You're here," Lily said. "I said I would be," Maya said. She looked Lily over, the green dress, the braids redone for the occasion, the composed face. "You look like someone who's ready." "I am," Lily said. Maya glanced up and met Ethan's eyes for a moment. Something passed between them. Acknowledgement, maybe, or the specific shared knowledge of two people who have both been watching the same child grow into herself over the past 2 months and are both, separately, trying not to show how much it means. "Shall we go in?" Ethan said. They went in. The Kimberly room was everything Margaret Whitfield's events always were. Beautiful, organized, and very aware of itself. 300 chairs facing a Steinway on a low stage, the room lit warmly, the ambient noise of a crowd of people who were making the social calculations you make at an event like this. Who to be seen talking to, where to position yourself, how to manage the collision of genuine support for children with the reality that this was also a networking event. Ethan moved through the room with the ease of someone who had been in rooms like this since he was in his 20s, and with the specific tension of someone who did not especially enjoy them. He spoke to 4 people on the way to their seats: brief, correct, the handshake, and the half-sentence, and the move on. Margaret Whitfield found them near the front and held his hands in both of hers and said how wonderful it was that Lily was participating and what a beautiful girl she'd become, and then looked at Maya with the polite, measuring look of someone trying to categorize a person who doesn't fit the available categories. "And you are?" Margaret said. "Maya Brooks," Maya said. "I work with Lily." Margaret's categorization settled somewhere. Staff, but present at the recital, which was unusual, noted. "How lovely," she said, in the way that people say things when they mean something different, and moved on. Maya said nothing. She sat down in her seat with the composure of someone who has been processed by Margaret Whitfield types before, and has decided they are not worth processing back. Ethan sat between them. He wasn't sure when he'd made that decision. Lily on his left, Maya on his right. It had just happened. The lights shifted as people settled. "She's 5th in the program," Lily said from his left. "I know," Ethan said. "Julian says she should breathe before she starts. She forgets to breathe. I'll tell her." "You can't tell her. She's backstage." "I'll tell her afterward then, retroactively." From his right, barely audible, a small sound from Maya. Not quite a laugh, the ghost of one. He did not look at her. The recital began. The first 4 children were good, varying degrees of good, the way children are, from a 9-year-old boy who played with evident terror and got through it by sheer momentum, to an 11-year-old girl who was clearly more talented than the event deserved and played with a precision that the room felt. Ethan watched them with the same attention he brought to things he'd agreed to observe, present, tracking, assessing. Then Lily walked out. She walked out the way she'd been walking differently these past 2 months. Not the careful, managed walk of a child performing her best self, but actually walking, actually present in her body, her green dress, and her redone braids, and her face that was not performing composure, but actually had it, the real thing, which is different, and which the room could feel. She sat at the Steinway. She adjusted the bench, Julian's instruction, and then she sat still for a moment, a breath, which she remembered. And then she placed her hands. She played the Clementi beautifully. That was the thing. She played it well. Technically secure, musically intelligent, the phrasing her own, and not just imitated from recordings. The room was attentive in the particular way that rooms are when a child is playing something they genuinely understand rather than executing something they've been instructed to execute. Margaret Whitfield in the second row had the expression of someone whose investment in a thing is being validated. Ethan watched his daughter play. He watched her hands on the keys and thought about those same hands kneading bread dough on a Tuesday. He watched her face and thought about the face she made when she was absorbed in something, the private, unperforming face. He thought about a little girl who learned silence in a silent house and cried at night with tissues so she wouldn't leave evidence. The Clementi ended. Applause. Genuine. Warm. Lily sat for a moment at the piano, and then she did not stand. She sat. In the audience, Ethan noticed. From his right, Maya went slightly still. Lily looked at the keys for a moment, and then, with the expression of someone who has thought about this and made a decision and is now on the other side of the decision, she started playing something else. It wasn't the Clementi. It wasn't anything Julian had assigned. It was the jazz thing, the song from the kitchen radio, still imperfect, still assembled by ear, the rhythm still approximate. The Steinway in the Kimberly room made it sound different from the apartment's practice piano. Bigger, more open, the wrong notes more visible, and also somehow more interesting in the acoustic space. The room shifted. Not badly. Not a disaster. Just the attention changed. 300 people recalibrating. Margaret Whitfield's expression doing something complicated. Ethan's hands tightened on his knees. From his right, Maya leaned forward almost imperceptibly. Lily played. And then something happened that nobody had planned and nobody had given her permission for. She made a mistake, a genuine one, not just an approximate note, but a genuinely wrong note, and she knew it, and she stopped for exactly half a second, and then she looked up at the audience for the first time, actually looked at them, actually looked out from behind the piano, and she played the wrong note again, deliberately. Then she played it a third time, and then she built something around it, and it became not correct, not what any teacher would have approved, but something, a small improvisation, a child deciding what to do with a mistake and choosing to turn it into a thing. She almost smiled, caught herself, almost smiled again. And in the audience, a man who had not laughed, not a real uncontrollable laugh, the kind that comes from the gut, not the polite social laugh, in 12 years felt something happen in his chest. From the stage, Lily's eyes found her father. He didn't plan what happened next. He had not planned anything that had happened in the past 2 months. Nothing had been planned. Everything had arrived without asking permission, and this was the same. A laugh, real, uncontrollable, starting in his chest and coming up through him before he could do anything about it. Not a loud laugh, not a scene, but real, the actual thing, the kind that can't be faked and can't be stopped once it starts. And he pressed his hand to his mouth and it came through anyway, the sound of it, brief and surprised and absolutely genuine. Lily heard it. He could see the moment she heard it. Something changed in her face. Some last thing that had been held very carefully for a very long time released all at once, and she laughed too. On stage, at the Whitfield recital, in front of the Kimberly Room's 300 people and the Steinway, and Margaret Whitfield's complicated expression and all of it. She laughed and played the wrong note again, and the room, not all of it, not the Margaret Whitfields of it, but enough of it, laughed with her. The 9-year-old boy from the first act, backstage, probably watching from the wings, probably understanding nothing and everything. It lasted maybe 40 seconds. Then Lily pulled the improvisation back and finished with something that was almost distantly related to the Clementi coda, a kind of musical bow. And she stood, and the room applauded. Some of them warmly, genuinely, some of them with the applause of people who are not sure what they just saw, but are responding to the aliveness of it. Lily walked off stage. Ethan sat in his chair with his hand still at his mouth. From his right, Maya said nothing. She didn't look at him, but her hand, resting on the armrest between their seats, was close enough that he could have covered it with his, close enough that the warmth of it reached him in the cool room. He didn't cover it, but he was aware of it the way you're aware of the first warmth after a long cold, not with analysis, not with categorization, just with the whole body, all at once. The next child came out and played. Ethan sat and watched and heard almost nothing of it, because his chest was doing something that was not grief and not quite joy either, but was adjacent to both of them and was, he understood, the feeling of a wall coming down. Not all of it, not the whole structure, but a section of it, quiet and without ceremony, no drama, just down. After the recital, there was a reception. Lobby, champagne, the same social mathematics as before. Lily appeared from backstage and came directly to where Ethan was standing with a glass he hadn't drunk from, and she stood in front of him with a face that was not performing anything, that was just watching him, reading him, waiting to see what he would do with what had happened. "You weren't supposed to improvise," he said. "I know," she said. "Julian is going to have thoughts about that." "I know," she said again. "Are you angry?" He looked at his daughter, 7 years old, green dress, the laugh she'd inherited, the directness she'd developed on her own. "No," he said. Lily nodded, once like a decision confirmed. "Dad," she said. "Yeah." "You laughed." He drank from his glass. "You played a wrong note on purpose." "I laughed first," Lily said. Not accusatory, just getting the sequence right. He put his glass down on a passing tray, looked at the room, then back at her. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Lily absorbed this. Around them the reception moved and murmured. Margaret Whitfield was talking to someone near the window. 300 people in a warm room at the end of December. Maya was a few feet away, talking to another nanny she'd apparently met at the drinks table. He could hear her laugh at something the woman said, easy and unperformed, the kind of laugh that exists without needing an audience. He heard that laugh, and something in him oriented toward it the way a thing orients toward warmth. He looked at Lily. Lily was looking at him with the diagnostic face, the one that had been getting more accurate every week. "You should talk to her," Lily said. "I talked to her." "Not about Lily things," Lily said. "You should talk to her about you things." He looked at his daughter. She looked back at him with the absolute composure of someone who is 7 years old and has already figured out more about her father than he has figured out about himself. "When did you get like this?" he said. "She says I was always like this," Lily said. "I just didn't have anywhere to put it." He stood with that for a moment. Then Margaret Whitfield materialized at his elbow with 2 men from her board, and the moment passed, the way moments do, always at the inconvenient time. And he was back in the room, in the reception, shaking hands and fielding the careful, pointed compliment about Lily's creative choices that was actually something else, and Lily drifted to the drinks table to find Maya. He watched them from across the room, Maya crouching down to Lily's level, finally, on her own terms, saying something that made Lily tuck her chin in that way she did when she was trying not to look pleased with herself. Maya's hand on her shoulder, brief and warm, and then both of them standing side by side looking at the room with the ease of people who have their own language, who have built a thing between them in 2 months that cannot be unlanguaged. He watched that from across the room at the Langford Hotel's Kimberly room on a December night, and he felt the wall come down a little further. Just a little. But enough. When they left, the 3 of them, in the car, Lily falling asleep against the window before they'd cleared the first block, always crashing after adrenaline, Maya sat on the opposite side of the back seat, not close, appropriate distance, watching the city go by. He said without thinking about whether to say it, "Thank you for being there tonight." She looked at him. "Lily asked me." "I know." A pause. "I'm glad she did." The car moved through the city. The lights went by. Lily breathed against the window. Maya said, after a moment, "She's going to be something, you know. When she's older, she's going to be a lot." "I know," he said. "She got that from somewhere." He looked at the window. "She got it from her mother," he said, "and she figured out the rest herself." He paused. "Maybe she had help." Maya said nothing. But in the dark of the car, with the city going by and Lily asleep against the glass, he heard the small breath she took. He looked at the lights. He did not look at her, but he was aware, the whole body, all at once, of every inch of distance between them. And for the first time in 12 years, that awareness felt less like a warning and more like a compass. The laugh was in the room before anyone could do anything about it. That was the problem with real things. They didn't announce themselves, didn't ask permission, didn't check whether the timing was convenient. Ethan's laugh at the Whitfield recital had lasted maybe 4 seconds. 4 seconds, in a room of 300 people, in front of Margaret Whitfield and her board and the assembled upper tier of Manhattan's charitable arts circuit. 4 seconds of something genuine that could not be unwitnessed. By Monday morning, 3 people had mentioned it to his assistant. By Tuesday, his phone had a message from his attorney, Franklin Reese. Not about legal matters, just a careful check-in, the kind that wasn't actually a check-in. And on Wednesday, his uncle called. Richard Carter was 67 years old and had been on the Carter Group's board of directors for 19 of those years. He'd helped Ethan build the company in the years after Claire's death. Or more accurately, he'd stood in rooms while Ethan built it, positioned himself close enough to the engine that people assumed he was part of the machinery. He called Ethan's personal number at 8 a.m., which was itself a signal, because Richard never used the personal number unless he wanted the conversation off the calendar. "I heard the recital went well," Richard said. He had the particular voice of men who have practiced warmth so long that it sounds almost real. "Lily played beautifully," Ethan said. "She did. Julian Mercer tells me she went off program." Ethan was at his desk. He set down his coffee. "She improvised." "In front of Margaret Whitfield's crowd." "Yes." A pause on Richard's end. The kind of pause that is itself a statement. People noticed Ethan. Margaret noticed. There's a way these things, when they get talked about. He let it hang. "You've worked very hard to build a particular perception. The stability of the household. The professionalism. After Claire, people were watching to see how you'd manage. And you did. You managed beautifully." "Lily laughed on a stage," Ethan said. She's 7. And you laughed in the audience, Richard said, which is lovely, of course. But there's been talk about the circumstances. The new nanny. A woman with no credentials to speak of, no references from families in our circles, showing up at a high-profile event as a guest. She was invited. By Lily. Still an invitation. Richard was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to say something that I want you to hear as coming from someone who cares about this family. The stability you've built, for Lily, for the company, for the trust perception, it rests on certain things being consistent. People need to see Ethan Carter as someone who has his house in order, literally and figuratively. A beat. A woman from Brooklyn who makes apple bread and takes your daughter to public libraries is a liability to that perception. The silence on Ethan's end was long enough that Richard said, "Ethan." "I heard you," Ethan said. "I'm not asking you to be unkind. I'm asking you to be sensible." "I'll think about it," Ethan said, which meant the conversation was over. He hung up. He sat at his desk with his hands flat on the surface and looked at the wall. He sat there for 11 minutes. Then he picked up his phone and called his assistant and went back to work. He did not say anything to Maya, but he was, for the first time since she'd walked into his apartment 3 months ago, thinking about what it would mean if she left. He should have known that Richard calling was not the event, just the warning. The event was Harrison Polk. Harrison Polk was 61, a senior partner at Whitmore & Polk, the law firm that had managed Carter Group's legal affairs for 8 years. He had a face like a closed door and a manner that was always precise and never warm, and a habit of requesting meetings that weren't on the schedule, which he did on a Thursday afternoon 3 days after the recital. He came to the office, not the penthouse, the actual Carter Group headquarters in Midtown, and he sat across from Ethan in the conference room with a leather portfolio that he did not open and said, in the tone of a man delivering a weather report, "There is a clause in the management trust your father established that gives the board the right to review leadership fitness under circumstances of, let's call it lifestyle instability. The clause has never been invoked. Nobody has ever wanted to invoke it, but it exists." Ethan looked at him. "You came here to tell me about a clause that has never been invoked." "I came here to tell you that 3 board members contacted my office this week." Harrison put his hands flat on the table. "I want to be very clear. I am your attorney. My job is to protect your interests. What I'm telling you is that there are people on your board who are looking for leverage, and they have found what they believe is a viable entry point. A nanny. A woman with no pedigree, no references from comparable households, who attended a high society event as a family guest, and who has, according to 2 people who were at the recital, been seen leaving your building on a Saturday morning alongside you and your daughter." Harrison's voice didn't change inflection at any point during that sentence, which was somehow worse than if it had. They're framing it as a question of judgment. Ethan was very still. What they're framing is a personal life. Your personal life has been notably absent for 12 years, which the board found reassuring. Its reappearance, Harrison chose his next word carefully, unsettles certain arrangements. Which arrangements? The kind that depend on you remaining exactly as you have been. He paused. There's an acquisition coming. Jersey City property, significant investment. The board needs to vote in February. There are members who would be very comfortable with a distracted chairman going into that vote. Ethan looked at his attorney for a long moment. Harrison looked back with the steady, neutral expression of a man who delivers information and leaves decisions to other people. "Is there legal exposure?" Ethan asked. "If they invoke the clause, there's a process. It would be visible. Messy. The press would have it within 48 hours. A pause. "But the clause requires a 2/3 vote to initiate. Right now they don't have it. They're looking for more grounds." "More grounds." "They're watching," Harrison said simply. "Whatever is changing in your household, they want to see if it continues." He stood, picked up his portfolio. "I'm not advising you on your personal life, Ethan. I'm advising you on your board." He moved toward the door. "Those are, unfortunately, sometimes the same thing." He left. Ethan sat in the empty conference room for a while. He thought about Richard's phone call. He thought about the board and the February vote, and the Jersey City acquisition, and the 12 years he'd spent building something that was now, apparently, contingent on him continuing to be the same person he'd been when he built it. The frozen, controlled, emotionally evacuated version that the board had found so reassuringly stable. He thought about Lily on a stage, laughing. He thought about 4 seconds of something real, and he thought about what it was going to cost. Mac. He said nothing to Maya for 4 days. That was its own decision. Not a clean one, not a good one, but a decision. He told himself he was thinking. He was actually avoiding, which he recognized and filed under thinking, because the alternative was looking at what he was actually doing, which was standing at the edge of something and trying to decide whether to step back. Maya, who noticed things, noticed. She didn't say anything about it directly. That was not how she operated. But on the Friday after Harrison Polk's visit, when Ethan came into the kitchen in the morning and she said good morning and he gave the clipped, efficient response that he'd been giving before she arrived 3 months ago, she looked at him for a fraction of a second too long. Just a fraction. Then she went back to making Lily's lunch. Lily noticed too, in her own way. The breakfast table on Friday was quieter than it had been, not the old silence, which had been total and structural, but the specific charged silence of a room where someone is not saying something they're thinking. Lily ate her yogurt and read 3 pages of her book, and when she was done, she said, to no one in particular, "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Ethan said. Lily looked at him with the diagnostic face, then at Maya's back. Then she closed her book and took her bowl to the sink, which was a thing she'd started doing in the past month without being asked. "Okay," she said, in the tone of someone who does not believe something is okay, but has decided not to fight about it right now. She went to get her school bag. The kitchen was quiet. Maya put the lid on the lunch container. Ethan drank his coffee. "You don't have to say anything," Maya said, not looking at him. Her voice was level, not cold, just steady, the way she always was. "But whatever it is, it's in the room. So," he set his coffee cup down. "There's nothing, Ethan." It was the first time she'd used his name without the Mr. Carter, and it landed differently than he'd anticipated, that one syllable, his name in her voice. No professional distance in it. He looked at her. She'd turned around now, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed, not defensively. She crossed her arms the way practical people do when they're having a conversation they want to stay clear-headed for. "Something happened," he said. "Yes," she said. "I can see that. It's board politics. It's—" He stopped, tried a different angle. "There are people in my company who watch my life for ammunition. It's something I've managed for years by not giving them anything to look at." Maya's face was careful and attentive and gave nothing back. "The recital was visible," he said. "The way things have been. Different. Here, it's visible. And visible is—" He ran out of sentence. "A liability," Maya said. Flat, not angry, just putting the word in the room. "I didn't say, 'You're about to.'" She said it without heat, just the way she stated things that were true. "You're trying to figure out how to say that what's changed in this apartment is a problem. For the board, for the perception, for—" She gestured at the general category of his life. The kitchen was very quiet. "I have a daughter to protect," he said. "I know. The trust, the company. If the board invokes a fitness clause, it's public. It's the press. It puts Lily in the center of—" "I understand," Maya said. Still level, still steady. Something had gone behind her eyes, though. Something had moved back from the surface. "I'm not—" He stopped, started again. "I'm not saying any of this is your fault." "No," she said. "I know you're not." A pause. "I know exactly what you're saying." He looked at her. She looked back at him, and he could see the thing she was deciding. Not whether to fight him, not whether to argue, but whether to tell him something or keep it. She uncrossed her arms, turned back to the counter and picked up the lunch container. "My grandmother's surgery is in 2 weeks," she said to the counter. "I have enough money now, mostly. I'm about 4,000 short, but there's a payment plan." She paused. "I've been doing the math every night for 3 months. It's going to work out." He said nothing. Waited. I'm telling you that, she said, because I want you to know that what I've done here, what Lily and I have, I didn't do it because I needed the money to stay. I did it because she needed it. She turned around one more time, looked at him directly, and because I wanted to. And I need you to know that before whatever conversation comes next. He stood with that. Maya, don't, she said, quietly, not unkindly. Don't say something careful right now. I'd rather you just say what you actually need to say. He looked at the woman who had walked into his apartment 3 months ago with a broken bag strap and tired eyes, and had done something to the air quality of his entire life without announcing it or asking for credit. He looked at her, and he knew what he needed to say, and he knew what was going to happen when he said it, and he said it anyway. I need to think about whether this arrangement is still workable, he said, given the circumstances. The word arrangement sat in the room like something that had been dropped. Maya looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said, very quiet. That's honest. Thank you for that. She picked up Lily's lunch bag. I'll finish the week, she said, and then we can decide. She walked out of the kitchen. He stood alone in the room for a while after she left. The espresso machine was still running. The smell of coffee and whatever she'd been making for Lily's lunch was in the air. He stood there and felt the specific, particular weight of having done the right thing for his daughter and his company and every practical obligation he had, and having felt like he'd done something completely wrong while doing it. He went back to his study. He did not get any work done that morning. But Lily found out on a Saturday. Not from Maya, not from Ethan. From the apartment itself, which changed again. The way it had changed when Maya arrived and was now changing in the opposite direction, the air tightening back toward what it had been. Lily felt it the way children feel things, through the body first, before the mind has language for it. Saturday breakfast was just the two of them. Maya didn't work Saturdays usually, but something about the quality of the morning told Lily that the absence was different this time. She ate her toast and watched her father not eat his and finally said, Are we going to Pietro's? Not today, Ethan said. Lily set down her toast. Why? I have work. You moved the Saturday calls. He looked at her. I moved them back. Lily said nothing. She looked at her toast, then at her father. Something was moving across her face, not the careful management of expression she'd learned in this apartment, but the actual feelings, which she'd been letting be visible for the past 3 months and which were visible now, confusion, and underneath it the particular fear of a child who has had good things taken away before and recognizes the early signs. Is Maya coming on Monday? She asked. A pause. Not long, but Lily caught it. We're figuring out the schedule, Ethan said. Dad? Lily, is Maya coming on Monday? Not a question anymore. The direct thing, the Lily thing, that had developed under Maya's particular influence. The refusal to let a sideways answer substitute for a straight one. Ethan put down his coffee. He looked at his daughter. He realized, terrified of this conversation. Not in the way he was usually afraid of things, which was structural, managerial, based on risk assessment. This was the other kind, the kind that comes from knowing you are about to do damage to someone you love and not being able to find the version of it that doesn't cause damage. Some things have come up, he said. With the company, with people who watch this household and make judgments about it. Lily stared at him. And having changes in the household, visible changes, gives people leverage over. You're sending Maya away, Lily said. I'm evaluating. You're sending her away because of the recital. Her voice had gone flat. Not cold. The flatness of someone absorbing something that hurts and has not yet decided what to do with it. Because she was there. Because you laughed. Because I laughed in front of the wrong people. Yes, he said, and hated how that sounded. Lily looked at him. The full look. And in that look he could see her. Not the child who had learned to be small and quiet and well-behaved, not the child who cried at night without leaving evidence, but the person his daughter was actually becoming, with opinions and attachments and the specific righteous anger of someone whose understanding of the world has been violated. She is my friend, Lily said. She is the first real friend I've had in this apartment, and you're going to send her away because some people think she's not the right kind of person. Lily, what kind of person are they looking for? Her voice cracked slightly at the end. She pressed through it. Someone who teaches me to eat correctly, someone who makes sure I don't feel anything, because that worked really well before. She pushed her chair back. I know what this apartment was like before Maya. I was there. She stood up. Lily, sit. I'm not hungry, she said. The controlled voice, the old voice, not because she'd regressed, but because she was using the only tool available to her, which was the same tool she'd always used, the appearance of composure over the actual mess of feeling. I'm going to my room. She went. Ethan sat at the breakfast table alone. He sat there for a long time, in the apartment that had been warm for 3 months and was now going cold again. And he thought about his daughter saying she is my friend. And he thought about the board clause and Harrison Polk's leather portfolio and Richard's careful, practiced warmth. And he sat with the weight of all of it without moving for long enough that the coffee got cold. Then he went to his study. He had calls. He made them. Maya came on Monday. Nothing had been officially decided. That was the truth of it. And both of them were living in that liminal space, carrying on the routine while the decision sat between them like an object neither of them wanted to move first. She made Lily's lunch and supervised the morning workbook and took the park walk at 3:15 on the laminated schedule. Lily walked close to her, closer than usual. At the bodega, Marcus the cat was in the window. Lily stopped, as she always did. She didn't say anything about him today, just looked at him for a moment with an expression that was a child's version of grief, the confusion of loving something and fearing it might not be there. Hey, Maya said. Lily looked at her. Don't do that thing where you close back up, Maya said. Whatever you're feeling right now, don't put it away. I thought that was the lesson, Lily said. Feeling things at the right moments. No, Maya said. The lesson was never to not feel things. The lesson was to know that you're allowed to. A pause. Big difference. Lily looked at the cat. Are you leaving? Maya was quiet for a moment. I don't know yet. My dad is going to ask you to. Maybe. Would you go? Lily's voice was careful and young and more direct than it had any right to be. If he asked? Maya crouched down, the way she hadn't in the beginning, not until she'd been invited. Eye level with Lily on the sidewalk on 82nd Street, with Marcus watching them from his stack of paper bags. I would not want to go, Maya said. I want you to know that. But you would. Lily, this is not... She stopped, tried again, from a different angle, the honest one. There are things happening in your dad's life that are bigger than me. I don't belong to this household. I was hired, and if the hire ends, I can't stake a claim to stay. I want you to stay, Lily said. I know. Doesn't that matter? Of course it matters. It matters to me more than you know. She looked at Lily steadily. But your dad is trying to protect you. That's what he's doing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Lily looked at her with an expression that was working very hard at understanding something that was genuinely hard to understand. It feels like the opposite of protecting me. I know, Maya said. Sometimes the things we're protected from hurt less than the protection. They stood there on the sidewalk. Marcus shifted on his paper bags and put his paw over his face. If you go, Lily said, very quiet, the kind of quiet that is not composed but exhausted, will you still be somewhere? Bushwick, Maya said. Same place I've always been. That's not what I meant. I know, Maya said. Yeah, Lily, I'll still be somewhere. Lily nodded, stood up straight, the small gesture of deciding to keep going that Maya had watched her practice for 3 months. They walked back to the apartment. On Tuesday evening, Richard Carter came to the penthouse. He arrived at 7 when Lily was in her room. Ethan had not told Maya he was coming, partly because he hadn't planned on it. Richard had called from the lobby, which was itself a statement, and partly because he didn't know what he would have said if he had. Maya was in the kitchen when Richard came through the door. She heard the voices. The particular timbre of Richard's voice, which carried, and she stayed in the kitchen. She wasn't hiding, she was making tea, and she continued making tea because that was where she was and what she was doing. "So this is the apartment now," Richard said in the living room, the tone of a man surveying a territory. "This is the apartment," Ethan said. "It's different from the last time I was here." A pause. "Warmer. You have bread on the counter. Lily baked it." Lily. A beat. The people at the recital said she was remarkable. Some of them said it admiringly. Some of them said it the other way. He sat. Maya heard the couch settle. "I got a call from Franklin today. The board is moving faster than we thought. There's a preliminary meeting scheduled for the 14th. Informal, deniable, but it's a meeting." "I know," Ethan said. He was standing, Maya could tell. His voice came from a different height than Richard's. "There's a clean way through this," Richard said. "The household returns to what it was. Whatever has changed in the past 3 months, you demonstrate that it was temporary, a transitional arrangement. You let Julian Mercer recalibrate Lily's musical direction. You restore the public image of a household that is controlled," Ethan said. "Stable," Richard said. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Richard's pause was longer this time. "You sound like you want to argue with me about this." "I'm listening," Ethan said. "I'm listening to what you're telling me I need to do to keep the board quiet. And I'm trying to figure out when I agreed that the board gets to weigh in on my daughter's childhood." "When you took Carter Group public," Richard said. Flat. "When you structured the trust the way you did, when you accepted the arrangement that gave you everything you built and came with the conditions it came with." His voice softened slightly. "I'm not your enemy, Ethan. I've been with this family since before you were born. I'm telling you what's coming." "I know what's coming," Ethan said. From the kitchen, Maya stood with her tea and listened. "The woman in the kitchen," Richard said. He said it the way he'd say the balance sheet, a line item to be addressed. Ethan said nothing. "Whatever you feel about her," Richard said. "Richard, I'm not saying anything about her character. I'm talking about optics. I'm talking about what 3 board members see when they look at Ethan Carter going to a bakery on Saturday mornings with his daughter's nanny. I'm talking about what they do with that." A pause. "She's not the problem, Ethan. The visibility is." "The visibility," Ethan repeated. "Yes. You mean the fact that I laughed. You know what I mean." Ethan was quiet for a while, long enough that the silence had weight. "Yeah," he said finally. "I know what you mean." Maya heard the click of what she identified as a glass being set down. "I'll think about it," Ethan said. Same words as the phone call, same tone. The conversation was over. Richard left 5 minutes later. Maya heard the door, and then footsteps, and then nothing for a while. She poured her tea down the sink. It had gone cold. She heard Ethan come to the kitchen doorway. She turned around. He looked tired. Not the managed, functional tiredness of a man who sleeps 5 hours because he's busy. The other kind. The tiredness of someone who has been holding something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told they need to keep holding it. "I'm sorry you heard that," he said. "I wasn't listening intentionally," she said, "but I did hear it." He came into the kitchen, stood at the counter, not the doorway this time, in the room, close enough that the distinction mattered. He looked at her directly. "The board is scheduling a preliminary meeting," he said, "about my fitness as chairman, using the household as a basis." "I know," she said. "I heard." "If it escalates, if it goes public, Lily is in the center of it. Her name, her school, the recital. It becomes a story that she has to live inside." "I understand," Maya said. "And you'd still be here," he said. "Whatever they're going to say about why things changed, you'd be named, your background, your references, the way you came to be here. They'll use all of it." "I know," she said. She was very steady. "I'm not afraid of what they'd say about me." "I know you're not," he said. And something in his voice when he said it, a kind of exhausted recognition, was the most honest thing she'd heard from him since the breakfast when he'd said, "I don't know about what his daughter did when she was happy." They stood in the kitchen of the 43rd floor apartment. I can't ask you to stay and be collateral damage in a boardroom fight, he said. That's not. He stopped. That's not something I'm willing to do. You're asking me to leave, she said. Straight, no buffer. He didn't answer. Which was the answer? Maya took a breath, let it out slowly. She thought about her grandmother's surgery, scheduled for the 2nd of January. She thought about Lily's face on the sidewalk saying, "Will you still be somewhere?" She thought about a man who had stood in his own hallway watching his daughter eat a piece of bread like it was the most important thing he'd ever seen and hadn't known what to do with that. She thought about being practical, which she had always been because life had required it. I'll finish the week, she said. Exactly what she'd said before, in this same kitchen. Maya, that's what makes sense, she said. I'll finish the week. Lily and we can say goodbye properly. That matters. He looked at her. Something moved across his face that he didn't stop fast enough. Something that was regret, and something that was something else. Something she chose not to name right now because naming it would make the kitchen smaller, and she needed the space to breathe. Friday, he said. Friday, she agreed. She picked up her coat from the back of the chair. She had not planned to leave tonight. Her shift ended at 6 and it was 5:48, but suddenly the kitchen felt like the wrong place to stand. Tell Lily good night for me, she said. I'll see her tomorrow. She went. He stood in the kitchen alone. He stood in the kitchen the same way he'd stood in the hallway and the same way he'd sat at the breakfast table Saturday morning, which was the way a man stands when he knows he's made a decision he cannot fully believe in, performing conviction while something underneath it refuses to be convinced. The bread Lily had baked was on the counter, slightly lopsided, denser than ideal. He'd meant to eat a piece of it with his evening coffee, and he'd forgotten. He stood and looked at it. He did not eat it, shammed. The last 3 days of that week had a specific quality that nobody in the apartment acknowledged directly. Mrs. Dalton knew. She knew everything, and she moved through her tasks with a particular kind of quiet that was her form of protest. Not saying anything, doing everything, keeping the household running with a precision that was also, if you looked at it from a certain angle, a reproach. Lily knew. She had known since Saturday. She moved through her days with a composure that was not the old composure, not the managing, minimizing, sound doesn't travel if I'm very still composure. This was different. This was the composure of a child who has decided to feel something and not run from it, which is a much harder thing than the other kind. She and Maya baked bread on Wednesday. Lily's technique had improved significantly from the first time. She found the tension in the dough now without being shown. Her hands had learned the thing that hands learn when you repeat them enough. They baked the bread and let it cool on the rack and ate it at the kitchen counter and didn't talk about Friday. They went to the library on Thursday. Lily returned the astronomy book. She'd finished it weeks ago. She was returning it because it was overdue. And she got 3 more books, and she got one that she put directly in her bag without showing it to Maya, which Maya didn't ask about. At the bodega, Marcus was in the window. Lily stopped, looked at him. He doesn't know, Lily said. No, Maya said. Animals don't know when something's ending. People don't always either, Maya said. It doesn't mean it's not ending. Lily was quiet. That's a sad thing to say. It's a true thing. Sometimes they're the same. Lily reached into her coat pocket. She'd been carrying a cat treat since Monday. Maya had given her a handful from the same supply she'd been carrying before. She held it up to the window glass, which was an ineffective delivery mechanism since Marcus was inside and she was out. But Marcus looked at the treat through the glass with his serious, dignified face and then looked at Lily as if to acknowledge the sentiment, even if the logistics were impossible. Next person who has this route, Lily said to Marcus, I'll tell them about you. She put the treat back in her pocket. On Friday morning, Maya arrived at 8 and made Lily's lunch, and they did the morning routine, and in the afternoon they sat in the living room. Not the kitchen, the living room, which Lily had started using in the past month, spreading her books and her puzzles across the coffee table in a way that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. And Lily read while Maya sat nearby. At 5 o'clock, Lily looked up from her book. I don't want to do a big goodbye, she said. I hate those. They always feel like the wrong shape. Okay, Maya said. I just want to... She thought about it. I want to say that you changed things here, and I know it wasn't your job to do that. You were just supposed to follow the schedule. Lily, I'm not finished, Lily said with dignity. I want to say that I learned things from you that I'm going to keep. Even when it gets quiet again, I'm going to remember what loud feels like. Maya looked at this child. 7 years old, with her astronomical seriousness and her inherited laugh and her drawings hidden under a mattress and her hands that had learned to find the tension in bread dough and her voice that was finally starting to sound like hers. She crossed the room and she hugged her. Not the careful, appropriate hug, the real one. Lily hugged back with both arms, her face pressed into Maya's shoulder, and neither of them talked for a minute. Then Lily let go, straightened, adjusted her braids. You can go, she said, very dignified, only slightly wrecked. Maya stood up, picked up her bag, the one with the safety pin, which had been replaced by a proper clasp sometime in November, a thing Mrs. Dalton had done without comment. She put her coat on. Bushwick, she said. Same place. I know, Lily said. Maya walked down the hallway. She passed the study door, which was closed. She stood in front of it for a moment. She could hear the specific quiet of someone sitting very still on the other side of a wall. And that was a specific quiet she knew now. She'd learned it over 3 months. It was the sound of Ethan Carter trying to hold something together. She put her hand on the door, flat, for a moment, against the wood. Then she took her hand away. She went to the elevator. She rode down 43 floors and walked through the lobby and out through the revolving door onto the sidewalk, where the January cold hit her all at once. She walked to the subway. She did not look back. Behind her, in the 43rd floor apartment, a little girl sat in the living room with a book she wasn't reading, and a housekeeper wiped a counter that was already clean, and a man sat in his study with his hands flat on his desk, in the silence that he had built and maintained for 12 years, and which had, briefly, been replaced by something else. The silence came back. But it was not the same silence. It was the kind that knows what it's missing. And in the space between what had been and what now wasn't, Ethan Carter sat very still and felt something that he had no name for. Something that was not grief exactly, though it borrowed grief's vocabulary. It was the feeling of a door closing on a room you hadn't realized was warm until you were on the wrong side of it. The first week without Maya was the quietest the apartment had been since before she arrived. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind, the kind with teeth. Mrs. Dalton moved through her routines with a precision that had developed a new quality, deliberate, almost aggressive in its correctness, as if by performing every task perfectly she could lodge a complaint that didn't require words. She ironed things that didn't need ironing. She reorganized the pantry. She said good morning to Ethan every day and good evening when she left and nothing in between unless directly addressed, which was technically her job and somehow felt like a verdict. Lily went back to her schedule. That was the thing that Ethan noticed first. Not that she was sad, though she was, but that she went back. Back to the careful posture and the precise meals and the workbook completed before anyone could ask her to complete it. She brought his coffee every morning, same as always. She said fine when he asked how her day was. She played her assigned pieces on the piano with technical correctness, and then stopped and closed the fallboard and went to her room. She didn't play the jazz thing anymore. Not where anyone could hear it. Ethan noticed all of this. He filed it under adjustment period, which was a thing his mind produced as a category the same way it produced all its defensive categories, quickly, efficiently, without examining what the category was actually protecting him from examining. But adjustment periods have a duration, and this one was running long. By the second week, he was sleeping badly. Not dramatically. No nightmares, nothing cinematic. Just the ordinary insomnia of a person whose mind refuses to turn off at the times it's supposed to. He'd lie in the dark and think about the board meeting on the 14th, which he'd attended and which had been, as Harrison Polk predicted, inconclusive, informational. 3 men in a conference room making the shape of a concern without committing to it yet, watching him for reaction, finding none. He'd given them nothing. He was very good at that. He'd driven home from Midtown afterward and come into the apartment and past the kitchen, and there was no smell of anything in it, just the clean, neutral air of a room that was used for function and not for anything else. He stood in the kitchen for a while that evening. He thought about apple bread. He thought about lopsided bread on a rack. He thought about a little girl with flour on her face who laughed because she couldn't help it, and a man in a hallway who stood very still because he didn't know what else to do. He went to bed. He didn't sleep. On a Thursday in the third week, he came home from the office at 7, and Lily was in the living room, not reading, not doing a puzzle, just sitting on the couch with her legs folded under her, looking at the window. The city was dark outside. She didn't look up when he came in. "Hey," he said. "Hi," she said. To the window. He came and sat on the other end of the couch that had books spread across it most evenings for the past 3 months. It was clear now, neat. They sat there together, the two of them, in the clean, quiet apartment above Manhattan. "How was your day?" he asked. "Fine," she said. He sat with that for a moment, looked at the window himself, the city lights going on across the dark. Lily. She looked at him. There were no tears on her face. She'd gotten better at the not leaving evidence thing, though for all the wrong reasons. But her eyes had a quality he recognized because he'd seen it in the mirror often enough. The particular flatness of someone who has decided that feeling things loudly is not worth what it costs. He looked at his daughter and saw himself, and it was the most uncomfortable thing he'd experienced in the 3 weeks since Maya left, which was saying something. "I know things are—" He stopped. "Different," Lily said, flat. "Yes." "They were different before too," she said. "I remember what before was." "I know. I don't want to go back to before." She said it quietly and precisely, the way she said things that she'd thought about for a long time and had finally decided to say. "I know you think the before was better, safer, but I was really lonely, Dad. I don't think you knew that." He sat very still. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said. "I didn't have the words for it before. Maya helped me find the words." A pause. "She helped me find a lot of things." He looked at his daughter. "I know," he said. "Do you?" She looked at him now, the full look, the one that had been developing for months and was now fully formed, this 7-year-old's direct and devastating capacity to see a thing and say what it was. "Because I think you miss her too, and I think you're doing the same thing you always do, which is deciding that the feeling is the problem instead of the thing causing the feeling." The apartment was very quiet. He started to say "that's a lot," and stopped, because it was a lot, and it was also accurate, and he'd been the one who'd told her the difference between real answers and sufficient-sounding ones. "Maya taught me that," Lily said. "She said feelings aren't the problem. They're information." He looked at his hands. "She said—" Lily's voice caught slightly, and she pressed through it. "She said that sometimes people protect the people they love by taking away the things that are good for them, because they're afraid of what the good things cost. And she said that's not actually protection. That's just fear with a different name." Ethan sat on the couch in his quiet apartment. He sat with that for a while, long enough that Lily unfolded her legs and stretched them out in front of her and looked at the ceiling. "I miss her," Lily said, to the ceiling. Simple, not dramatic, just true. "I know," he said. "Do you miss her?" He didn't answer immediately. He sat with the question the way he'd been sitting with it for 3 weeks, which was with the specific discomfort of a person who knows the answer and has been deciding whether the answer is actionable. "Yes," he said. Lily looked at him. "Yeah," he said again. "I miss her." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then she said, with the pragmatic energy of someone who has identified a problem and would like to move to the solution phase. "So, what are you going to do about it?" He looked at his daughter. "I don't know," he said. "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's not." She looked at him a moment longer. Then she unfolded herself from the couch and stood up. "I'm going to go read," she said. "You should think about it." She went down the hallway. He sat on the couch alone. He thought about it. The thing that broke it open was not dramatic. It was not a boardroom confrontation or a legal ultimatum or a call from Richard that pushed him to the edge of something. It was smaller than that. It was almost embarrassing in its smallness, given everything that had led up to it. It was Saturday morning. He woke at 6:15 and the apartment was quiet. He got dressed. He went to the kitchen and made coffee. And then he stood at the counter with his coffee and he looked at the window, and outside the window was a January morning in Manhattan. Gray, cold, the city moving at its weekend pace, slower than the week. And he thought, Pietro's is open. That was it. That was the whole thought. Pietro's is open on Saturday mornings, and they'll have something on the special board that he won't have decided on yet because Pietro decides those things the morning of. And there's an espresso machine behind that counter that makes the real thing. And there's a counter where you can sit, and there's a newspaper man who reads actual paper. And 3 blocks away there is a red door. He put down his coffee. He went and knocked on Lily's door. She opened it in her pajamas, hair loose, looking like a child rather than a managed version of one. Because it was Saturday morning and no one had told her to be anything yet. "Get dressed," he said. "We're going to Pietro's." She looked at him. "Don't make a thing of it," he said. "Just get dressed." She got dressed in under 6 minutes, which was a record that neither of them mentioned. They went to Pietro's. Pietro looked at them over the counter. The two of them, same as they'd been coming for weeks. The tall man and the small girl, and said nothing, just brought coffee and cocoa and the morning special, which was a ricotta pastry that Lily assessed with serious attention and then declared acceptable. They ate. Lily read. Ethan drank 2 espressos. After the second espresso, he said, without looking away from his cup, "Do you know her address?" Lily looked up from her book. "In Bushwick," he said. "Did she ever tell you the address?" Lily's face did something complicated. She was trying not to show what she was feeling about this question, and she was not entirely succeeding. "She mentioned the cross streets once," she said carefully. "Myrtle and Knickerbocker. She said it was above a laundromat." He turned his cup in his hands. "Okay," he said. Lily went back to her book with the focused intensity of someone who is very carefully not reacting to something. They finished and walked home. At the building entrance, Lily said, without looking at him, eyes forward, "The surgery was January 2nd. He looked at her. "How do you know about that?" "I listen," she said. "It's a thing people do." A pause. "It's the 2nd today. So if the surgery was scheduled, it's happening today," he said. "Or already happened," Lily said, "depending on what time." He stood on the sidewalk. He thought about Maya in a hospital waiting room or a cab on the way to one, and her grandmother, and the $43,000, and the $4,000 she'd been short, and the payment plan she'd arranged. He thought about a woman who had come into his apartment 3 months ago with a broken bag strap and a need so specific she could put a number on it, and who had never once used that need as leverage or a bid for sympathy or anything other than a private, practical problem she was managing. He thought about what she'd said in the kitchen. "I need you to know that I didn't do it because I needed the money to stay. I did it because she needed it." He went upstairs. He sat at his desk. He made 2 calls. The second call was to his personal financial manager. He drove to Bushwick that evening. He drove himself, which he almost never did. He had drivers. He had cars. The infrastructure of a man who moved through the city as a managed event. He drove himself in a car he'd bought 18 months ago and rarely sat in the front seat of, and he drove through Manhattan and over the bridge and into Brooklyn, into streets that got narrower and quieter and more residential, past the kind of buildings that have been holding people for decades. Not elegant, not designed, just solid and occupied and alive in the specific way of places where life is lived without managing what it looks like. He found Myrtle Avenue. He found the laundromat, closed at this hour, the machines visible and still behind the glass, and the building above it, 5 stories of brick that had been red once and had faded to something more honest. He sat in the car for a while. He almost left. He sat there and thought about the 14 ways this was a bad idea, and the 3 ways it was probably too late, and the specific absurdity of a man who had let 3 weeks of silence answer a question he'd never had the courage to actually ask. He got out of the car. The vestibule had buzzers with handwritten names on small paper slips. He looked at them. Brooks, 4C. The handwriting was clear and deliberate, the same quality of handwriting, he thought, that would organize a child's library book list. He pressed the buzzer. A long pause. Then, Through the small speaker, "Yes?" Her voice, even through the buzzer static. "It's Ethan," he said. He felt the inadequacy of that. "It's Ethan," in a vestibule in Bushwick, like this was the most normal thing. The pause was longer this time. Long enough that he thought she might not buzz him in. Long enough that he understood, waiting in the vestibule, that whatever happened next was entirely her choice, and that he had no argument to make against it if she decided to leave him standing there. The door buzzed open. He went up 4 flights of stairs that were narrow and slightly uneven and smelled of the building's life. Cooking, laundry, something that might have been cedar. The wallpaper in the stairwell was old and had been painted over at some point and was peeling at the edges, and the light fixture on the 3rd floor was doing something uncertain with its fluorescent bulb. Apartment 4C. He knocked. She opened the door. She was in a gray sweatshirt and jeans, no shoes, her hair down. She looked like herself. Not the nanny, not the carefully assembled person who entered his apartment every morning. Just Maya, in her apartment, at 8 in the evening, after what had clearly been a long day. Her eyes were slightly red at the edges, which he registered and didn't know what to do with. She looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment without saying anything, and then she said, "You drove yourself?" "Yes." "I can tell. You look disoriented." "I'm fine." "You don't drive." "I drive," he said. "I just don't." "I drove." She looked at him standing in her hallway. Then she stepped back and opened the door wider. The apartment was small. It was genuinely, practically small. A living room that was also a dining room, a kitchen visible through a doorway that was smaller than his pantry, a window looking out at the street, a bookshelf that was actively overfull with books organized in a system that appeared to be hers and was not alphabetical or by color or by any system he could immediately identify. There were plants on the windowsill, some of them struggling, one of them clearly not going to make it, all of them being kept anyway. There was a blanket on the couch that was the kind of blanket that has been used so many times it has become part of the furniture. It was warm. It smelled of something he identified after a moment as the vanilla thing, the hand cream or whatever it was, the thing that had been in his apartment for 3 months and was now here in its origin, stronger and more itself. "The surgery," he said. "This morning," she said. She stood near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, watching him. "She's out. She's stable. They think it went well. They're monitoring her overnight." "You didn't go home," he said, "because she was here, not at the hospital. They made me leave at 7, visiting hours." A pause. "I sat there all day." He looked at her. She looked like someone who had sat in a hospital all day. Not devastated, but emptied out. The particular exhaustion of a long vigil. "I should have," he started. "Don't," she said. Not unkind, just clear. "I want to say something." "Okay." She stood still, watching. He stood in her apartment and looked at her and thought about what he'd been composing in the car and during the drive and during the 3 weeks before that, and all of it felt, standing here in her actual space, like the wrong version, like the managed version, like something he'd prepared so he'd have control over how it landed. He let all of it go. "I made you leave because I was afraid," he said. "Not of the board, not of Richard. I was afraid of—" He stopped, started again from the honest place. "I've been holding myself at a specific temperature for 12 years, and I told myself it was for Lily. That stability required it, that she needed a father who was functional and present and not broken." He looked at the bookshelf, at the struggling plants, back at her. "And then you walked into my apartment and you didn't do anything dramatic. You made bread and you took Lily to a library and you told her it was okay to cry and you paid attention to things I'd stopped seeing and the temperature changed and I didn't know what to do with that except be afraid of it." Maya said nothing. She was very still. "I sent you away because you reminded me of what I was missing," he said, not in an abstract way. Specifically, "You reminded me that I used to be a person who went to places with red doors and ate with both hands and laughed at the wrong moments, and then that person had everything taken away and rebuilt himself around the absence. And somewhere in there I looked up and my daughter was 7 years old, and she'd learned to be invisible in her own home. He stopped. The words had gotten ahead of him, and he let them. You didn't break anything in my house. You just showed me what was already broken. The apartment was very quiet. I'm not telling you this to ask you to come back, he said. I'm telling you because you were right when you said you wanted me to say the actual thing instead of the careful thing. This is the actual thing, and He looked at her. I owe you that, at minimum. Maya unfolded her arms. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she walked to the kitchen, and he heard the sound of a kettle being filled, the click of the burner. Sit down, she said. You drove from Manhattan, which clearly took everything out of you. He sat on the couch, on the blanket that had become furniture. She came back with 2 cups, tea, not coffee, because it was evening, and she knew he switched at some point, and he was oddly aware that she knew that. She sat in the chair opposite him, both hands around her cup, and looked at him with the same steady attention she brought to everything that mattered. I want to ask you something, she said. Okay. Lily, this is about Lily first, before it's about anything else. Tell me you understand that. I understand that, he said. It's always been about Lily. No, she said. It hasn't always. That's the problem. She said it without heat, just factually, the way she stated things that were true. It's been about the appearance of Lily being okay, the managed version, the version where she performs contentment at the right moments and everyone can look at her and say that child is fine. That's not the same as actually being about Lily. He sat with that. You're right, he said. She's not fine right now, is she? Maya said. No. He looked at his hands. She's going back. I can watch her going back to what she was before, and I don't know how to stop it because I was the one who started it. You started both things, Maya said, the before and the going back, and you could start something different. A pause. That's what I need you to understand before anything else, that you have to be actually different, not because I'm there and the air quality changes, because you decided. He looked at her. I know, he said. Do you? Maya. Her name, the way she'd said his, no distance in it. I drove across a bridge by myself at night for the first time in I don't know how long. I'm sitting on your couch, I know. Something moved across her face, softened. You have a board, she said. I have a board. And Richard and Harrison Polk. I know their names, he said. Yes. They're not going to go away because you drove to Bushwick. I know that too, he said. But I've been letting the board be the reason for things I was choosing to do anyway. That's the part that needs to stop. The board is a practical problem. He gestured vaguely with the manner of someone who does not usually make sweeping gestures. Resources for practical problems. You're going to fight them, she said, not a question. I'm going to stop giving them things to use, he said. The fitness clause requires grounds. For 3 months I was providing grounds without thinking about it. Not because anything was actually wrong, but because I was visibly thawing, and people who depend on me staying frozen read that as instability. He set down his cup. I'm going to stop caring what they read it as. That's easy to say from a couch in Bushwick. I know, he said. I know it gets harder. And I know that you would be visible, that you'd be... He stopped. I'm not going to make promises about the board that I can't guarantee. What I can tell you is that I'm done building my life around what they're comfortable with. Maya drank her tea, looked at him. $4,000, she said. He blinked. What? You know what? She looked at him steadily. I'm not stupid, and neither are you. You know about my grandmother's surgery, and you know I was $4,000 short and you drove here tonight, which means at some point today you also made a call. Don't... She shook her head. Don't let that be the thing you lead with. He was quiet for a moment. It went through, he said. An anonymous payment to the hospital's billing department, she said. The hospital coordinator called me at 5 and I was in the waiting room and I had no idea what to say to her. Her voice was very steady, which meant she was working to keep it that way. Was it you? Yes. You didn't have to do that. I know. I wasn't asking you for that. I've never asked you for anything beyond my salary. I know that, he said. You've never asked me for anything. He stopped. That's part of what I'm trying to say. You came into my household and you gave Lily things she needed and you changed what the air was like in every room you were in, and you never once asked me for anything except honesty, which I was very slow to provide. He looked at her. I'm not buying my way into this conversation. I'm trying to close a gap that I should have closed before I asked you to leave. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, she asked me at the end, Lily. She said, are you still going to be somewhere? And I said yes. Bushwick, same place. She paused. I meant it, but I also knew that same place isn't actually close enough. Not for her. No, he said. It's not. I'm not the same as close enough. No. The apartment was quiet. Through the window, the street below was doing its evening thing. Someone's music from a passing car, the laundromat sign buzzing, the city at half volume. I liked it, Maya said, quietly. Being there, with both of you. She said it like she was deciding something at the same time she said it. I liked who she's becoming. I liked... She stopped. Say it, he said. She looked at him. I liked who you were starting to become. In Pietro's. In the kitchen. When you stood in the hallway and you thought nobody could see you and you were just watching her. Watching your daughter be a kid. She shook her head. I liked that man. I wanted to know what he was going to be like in 6 months. In a year. You could, he said, know what he's going to be like. Ethan, I'm not offering you a job, he said. And then he stopped because he heard how that sounded. And he did something he was not accustomed to doing, which was let the pause be what it was rather than filling it efficiently. I'm asking you to come back. Not as an employee. Not with a laminated schedule and a file at Hartwell Domestic. He looked at her. I'm asking you to come back as someone who matters to my daughter and to me. And I understand if that's too complicated, given everything. And I understand if you need time. And I understand... Ethan, she said. He stopped. You're doing the careful thing again, she said. He looked at her. Ask me what you actually want to ask me, she said. He sat in her apartment on her second-hand couch that smelled faintly of vanilla, and he looked at this woman who had walked into his life with a broken bag and tired eyes, and had, over the course of 3 months and without asking for credit or permission, become the person he'd been standing in doorways thinking about every evening for 3 weeks. Come back, he said. Simple. No scaffolding around it. Please. Maya looked at him. She looked at him for long enough that he felt the full weight of not knowing, the actual suspense of a thing where the outcome is genuinely in someone else's hands, and you cannot manage it or control it or prepare for the version where it goes wrong. He sat with it. He let it be what it was. Then she said, the board meeting in February. I'll handle it. You don't know what that means yet. No, he said. But I know that I'm done making decisions about my life based on what 3 men in a conference room find reassuring. He paused. I've built enough. I have enough. If the cost of keeping it is being that person again, the frozen one, then it costs too much. That's easy to believe in a couch in Bushwick, she said. Again. I know, he said. You're going to have to watch me be it in the other rooms. She almost smiled. Not quite. Close. My grandmother gets out tomorrow, she said. She's coming to stay with me for 2 weeks while she recovers. I can't leave her right now. I know, he said. Take the time you need. After 2 weeks, she stopped. I need it to be different. Not the arrangement, everything. I can't be a nanny who eats lunch alone in a kitchen and is careful not to take up space. I won't do that again. You never did, he said. Take up space. You were in every room of that apartment. You know what I mean? Yes, he said. I know what you mean. And yes, it'll be different. She looked at the window, at the struggling plants, at her cup of tea. Then she said, Lily's going to be insufferable about this. He almost laughed. She's been managing me toward this conversation for 3 weeks. She's 7. I know. It's concerning. The corner of something moved on his face. She said feelings are information. She said she read it somewhere. She read it, Maya said. She was also listening when I said it out loud in the kitchen. She listens to everything. She learned it here, Maya said, in the quiet. She had a lot of practice. He sat with that. The specific ache of it, a child who had learned to listen to everything because there was nothing else to do. I want her to have more than listening, he said. I want her to be loud sometimes. I want her to make messes in the kitchen and leave her books everywhere and play the wrong notes on purpose, and he stopped. I want her to be a kid, and I think I need help remembering what that looks like, because I forgot how to... He ran out of sentence. Be a person, Maya said, something like that. She looked at him, the steady, undeflecting look that had been the first thing he'd really noticed about her in the interview, when she'd looked right back at him while everyone else found things to look at instead. 2 weeks, she said. I'll come back in 2 weeks. He exhaled. It wasn't controlled. He didn't try to make it controlled. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me yet, she said. Wait until you see what Lily does when I tell her. He stood up. He picked up his coat from the back of the chair where he'd put it. He stood in her living room, in this small, warm, plant-filled, overcrowded apartment, and he understood something in a way he hadn't understood it before, that the thing he'd been building for 12 years, the empire of glass and marble and control and silence, was not actually what he'd been trying to build. He'd been trying to build somewhere to survive, somewhere that could hold a man who'd lost the person he built everything with, somewhere with enough structure that the loss couldn't get in. He'd built the right thing for the wrong person, for the man he'd had to be when Claire died, not for the man who still existed underneath all that building. That man, it turned out, wanted something a lot more like this. A couch that had become furniture, plants that were struggling but being kept, bookshelves organized in some system that only made sense to their owner, something real, something imperfect, something that was actually, honestly, alive. He went to the door, turned back. Myrtle and Knickerbocker, he said. What? Your address. I'm going to remember it. He looked at her. In case I need to come back. She looked at him. Something in her that had been held back, carefully, practically, with the particular discipline of a woman who had spent her whole life making things work on insufficient resources. Let go slightly. Not all the way. Just enough. You won't need to come back, she said. I'll be there. He nodded. He went down the 4 flights of stairs through the vestibule, out onto Myrtle Avenue, where the January night was cold and clear and the laundromat sign buzzed its indifferent neon. He got in his car. He sat for a moment. Then he drove home. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, the elevator opened on the 43rd floor, and Maya stepped into the private vestibule with a bag over her shoulder, the same canvas bag, still held by the clasp Mrs. Dalton had replaced. But there was a second bag now, a larger one, which meant something that neither of them had explicitly named yet, but which both of them understood. Before she could knock, the door opened. Lily, in her pajamas, hair loose, Saturday morning face, the actual child face, no performance in it. She looked at Maya for approximately 1 second. Then she opened the door all the way and stepped back and said, with the dignity of someone who has been waiting for something and is refusing to make a spectacle of being relieved, "You're early." "I took the earlier train," Maya said. "Did my dad know you were taking the earlier train?" "No." "So he doesn't know you're here yet?" "No." Lily absorbed this. "He's in the kitchen," she said. "He made coffee, but he's been standing there for 20 minutes, not drinking it." Maya came inside. The apartment smelled like coffee and the specific January morning quality of winter light coming through floor-to-ceiling windows. The marble floors reflected it the same way they always had. The artwork was still precisely placed, but Lily's books were on the coffee table, spread open. Left there from last night, she'd been reading and gone to bed and left them because she was coming back to them, and that was what you did with books. You were coming back to. It was a small thing. It was the most important thing Maya had seen since she walked back into this building. She put her bags down. She walked to the kitchen doorway. Ethan was standing at the counter with his coffee, looking at the window. He heard her and turned, and he looked at her with an expression that was not managed. That was just the face of a man who had been standing at a counter for 20 minutes because he wanted something to happen, and it was happening. "You're early," he said. "Apparently that's notable," she said. "I would have sent the car." "I know," she said. "I took the train." He looked at her. She looked at him. And the kitchen that had been quiet and neutral and functional for 2 weeks, did something with the air that it does when certain people are in the same room, something that isn't dramatic or cinematic. Just the quality of the air changed. It became warmer slightly, more itself. "The board meeting is on the 14th, he said. "I know. Franklin thinks the votes aren't there. Richard is... We'll see about Richard." "Okay," she said. "It might get loud. Publicly." "Okay," she said again. "I've been loud before. I grew up in Bushwick." Something moved on his face, the thing that was almost a laugh. Don't make a thing of it," she said. "Just make me a cup of that coffee." He made her a cup. She sat at the counter, the same stool she'd used for 3 months, which was apparently her stool now, in the way that things become yours without paperwork. And she wrapped her hands around the cup and looked at the kitchen that she'd stood in and cooked in and had small conversations in, and she felt the particular feeling of returning to a place that had changed while you were gone and changed you in the process of returning. It wasn't the same as before she left. It couldn't be. It was something after the before and after the leaving, which was a different country, newer and less mapped. From down the hall came the sound of Lily at the piano. Not the Clementi, not the assigned piece, the jazz thing. The song from the kitchen radio, the one without a name. She was playing it like she'd been practicing it privately for 2 weeks, which she probably had. It was more formed now, the rhythm less approximate, the wrong notes starting to become intentional rather than incidental. It was not a finished thing. It was a work in progress by a 7-year-old who was still figuring out what her hands could do. It was, in the morning light of the 43rd floor, the best thing Maya had heard in 2 weeks. Ethan turned toward the sound. His face did the thing that she'd catalogued months ago, the almost laugh, except this time it got closer than usual. This time it broke the surface, briefly. A real sound, small, unannounced. He looked at her. She looked at him. Neither of them said anything about it. This was the part that nobody tells you afterward, when things resolve. Not the dramatic moment, not the drive through the rain and the things said on couches, but the morning after all that. The ordinary morning where everything is still imperfect, and the board meeting is still in 2 weeks, and the wrong notes are still wrong, and the plants on the windowsill in an apartment in Bushwick are still struggling and might not make it, and none of it is fixed, none of it is finished, and all of it is real. This was what she'd come back to. Not the resolution, the ongoing. The coffee was good. Mrs. Dalton's brand, the right one. Down the hall, Lily played her song with its approximate rhythms and its deliberate wrong notes, and the sound of it went out into the apartment's air and traveled, the way sound does, through the rooms. It reached the kitchen. It stayed there. Oh-hum. The board voted on the 14th, 7-4 against invoking the clause, with Richard abstaining, which was, as Harrison Polk explained afterward, the most elegant possible way to lose a fight. The Jersey City acquisition moved forward. The company continued in its company way. Ethan told Lily about it that evening in the simplified version that a 7-year-old needed. "Some people at work wanted things to go back to how they were before," he said. "Before Maya," Lily said. "Before a lot of things." "And?" "They didn't get what they wanted." Lily considered this with her characteristic gravity. "Good," she said, simply, and went back to her book. It was not the end of anything difficult. The board remained the board. Richard remained Richard, which was its own ongoing negotiation. The company demanded what companies demand, and Ethan gave it what it needed and no more, and learned, slowly, imperfectly, with backsliding and recalibration, to locate the line between his work and his life and stand on the life side of it sometimes. Maya's grandmother recovered. She came to the apartment on a Sunday, walking with a cane she was already impatient with, and sat at the kitchen counter while Maya made lunch, and Lily showed her the bread she could make now, and Mrs. Dalton served tea with the particular warmth she reserved for people who had survived hard things with dignity. Ruth looked at the apartment around her, the marble, and the view, and the 43 floors of Manhattan below, and then looked at her granddaughter moving through it like she belonged there. She said nothing about it that afternoon, but later when they were leaving, she took Maya's arm in the elevator and said quietly, "You always did find the room that needed warming." Maya looked at the elevator numbers. "Gran," she said. "I'm not saying another word," Ruth said, and didn't. Spring came, eventually. Manhattan's grudging version of it, cold until it isn't, gray until one morning it isn't, and then suddenly the trees in Central Park are doing the yellow-green thing, and people come out of their buildings as if surprised that the city contains light. On a Saturday in April, 3 of them walked through the park. Not a scheduled park walk, not a laminated route. Just walking. Lily had a library book and was reading while she walked, which was technically not safe, and which nobody made her stop doing because she'd developed the specific skill of reading in motion that some children have, and which cannot really be taught. Maya had coffee in a paper cup. Ethan had his hands in his coat pockets. Lily stopped walking. They stopped with her. She was looking at something in the tree above. A bird, ordinary, a sparrow doing what sparrows do, perched on a branch and looking at the path below with the specific dignity of a bird that believes it owns the situation. "Look," Lily said, not to either of them in particular, just look. They looked. The bird looked back at them with its tiny, unconcerned face. Then it flew away. Lily watched it go. Then she looked at her book. Then she started walking again, reading as she went. Ethan looked at the tree, then at Maya. She was watching Lily walk away, her face doing the thing it did when she was watching something she liked. Not the managed warmth, not the professional attentiveness, just her, looking at something that mattered to her. He didn't say anything, but he took his hands out of his coat pockets, and when she shifted her coffee to her other hand, he took the hand that was free. She looked at him. He looked at the path ahead. "Lily's going to see," Maya said. "Lily already knows," he said. They walked. Ahead of them, Lily read her book and didn't turn around, which was its own kind of grace. The grace of a 7-year-old who had learned to pay attention to things, and who is choosing, right now, to pay attention to the page in front of her and let the people behind her have the moment they were having. The path went on. The park went on around them. The city made its Saturday sounds, traffic and birds and someone somewhere playing music from a speaker, too far away to identify but close enough to hear. The things that had broken were still broken, the way things that break don't fully unbreak. The grief was still Claire-shaped and always would be. The board would always be the board. Money would always have its appetites. The apartment would still have marble floors and precise artwork and the fundamental tension of a place designed for impression trying to become a home. None of that resolved. It just became the landscape of a life that was, underneath all of it, being actually lived, imperfectly, honestly, with wrong notes that were sometimes the best part, and bread that came out lopsided, and plants that struggled but were kept. And a little girl who laughed when she meant to and cried when she needed to, and asked the hard questions in sideways voices and drew pictures of people laughing and no longer hid them under mattresses. She'd put one on the refrigerator last week, a drawing of 3 people in a park, the proportions childlike, the perspective flat, everyone's arms too long. 2 adults and a small girl looking at something in a tree. At the bottom, in her careful block letters, U.S., April. It was still there. It would stay there.